There are moments when power reveals itself not through command, but through desperation. When the strongest walls crack not from force, but from loneliness so profound, it strips away every pretense of control. This is a story about a man who built an empire on fear and discovered vulnerability in the most unexpected place. A woman who carried scars from a continent away and found her strength reflected in someone else's darkness, and a single night that shattered every rule they'd lived by. Sometimes the most dangerous confessions happen in the safest silence. Before the story continues, let me say this: if any of these stories comfort you, entertain you, or make you feel understood, please subscribe. It's free, but it means everything to this channel. Now, let's continue. The stumble happened at exactly 2:47 in the morning. Kim Park Tae-yang's hand trembled as he gripped the crystal glass, whiskey spilling onto the marble floor of his penthouse office. 43 stories above Seoul's glittering Gangnam district, the most feared man in South Korea's underworld stood alone, watching the liquid pool like blood under the recessed lighting. His sharp jawline tightened, his normally cold eyes reflecting something he'd buried for 12 years, the weight of absolute isolation. But it wasn't the whiskey that shattered his composure. It was the woman standing in his doorway, her ebony skin glowing against the dim hallway light, curves that spoke of unapologetic strength, and eyes that held no fear, only recognition. Aaliyah James had seen men like him before. Different faces, different continents, same darkness. Yeah, she'd learned young that survival meant reading the shadows faster than they could consume you. "You called for housekeeping, Mr. Park?" Her voice carried the subtle rhythm of Lagos beneath practiced English, steady and unimpressed. Tae-yang turned slowly, his tailored black suit immaculate despite the late hour. But something in his expression cracked, just for 1.3 seconds, before the mask returned. "I called for you." The job offer had come through encrypted channels 3 days earlier. Yoon Da-eun, the elderly woman who ran Seoul's most discreet domestic staffing agency for the criminal elite, had explained it with clinical precision during their meeting in a Itaewon tea house. "Park Tae-yang needs a live-in housekeeper. You'll maintain his penthouse, prepare meals, eat, and ask no questions about the men who visit or the conversations you overhear. The pay is 15 million won monthly. You'll have your own quarters, full discretion, and one ironclad rule: you do not exist to anyone outside these walls." Aaliyah had studied Da-woon's weathered face, noting the barely visible scar along her left temple, the way her fingers never strayed far from the designer handbag that undoubtedly contained a weapon. This wasn't a housekeeping job. This was burial in plain sight. "Why me?" Aaliyah had asked once, only once. She'd learned not to waste questions. Da-eun had slid a photograph across the low table. Aaliyah's breath had caught. The image showed her from 6 months ago, outside the nightclub in Hongdae, where she'd worked briefly. But the focus wasn't on her. It was on the 3 men in the background, their faces circled in red ink. Those men worked for Hwang Tae-min, a loan shark who operated in the foreign worker districts. They were found in the Han River 2 weeks ago with their throats cut. Seoul Metropolitan Police questioned everyone who'd been at that club the night they were last seen alive. Your name appeared in their files. Aaliyah's jaw had tightened. She remembered those men, remembered their hands grabbing at the Filipina bartender, their laughter when she'd cried, remembered walking away when the club owner had done nothing. "I had nothing to do with their deaths." "I know," Da-eun had said simply, "but Hwang Tae-min doesn't. He thinks you witnessed something, maybe even testified secretly. He's put 50 million won on information leading to you. Every gangster in Seoul's underbelly is looking. Didi, you have 3 choices. Run back to Nigeria and let your family deal with the repercussions when Hwang's people come asking questions there. Stay in Seoul and wait for someone to recognize you, or disappear into Park Tae-yang's world, where even Hwang doesn't have clearance to reach." The choice had been obvious. Survival always was. Now, standing in Tae-yang's private office at nearly 3 in the morning, Aaliyah understood the real transaction. She wasn't just hiding, she was being hidden. And in return, she'd bear witness to whatever darkness this man carried. "You know who I am," Tae-yang said, setting down his glass with deliberate care. His Korean accent shaped the English words with precision, each syllable a calculated offering. "You know what I do. You run the Baeko faction. You control everything from Gangnam to Incheon ports, drug routes, protection networks, and enough politicians to rewrite laws." Aaliyah stepped into the office, her sneakers silent on the imported Italian tile. "You've been in power for 8 years since your predecessor died, in what the news called a home invasion. You're 34 years old, unmarried, and reportedly celibate according to the rumors even the cleaning staff whisper. Something flickered in Tai Yang's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or appreciation. Daun briefed you well. Daun gave me files. I filled in the rest. Aaliyah stopped 3 meters from his desk, close enough to speak plainly, but far enough to maintain the fiction of professional distance. But she didn't tell me why you specifically requested someone with my profile. A black woman, foreign, with no family in Korea and a target on her back. I'm not naive enough to think this is charity. Tai Yang moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, his reflection ghostly against the glass. You're right. It's not charity. It's strategy. Huang Tai-min is a rabid dog who needs to be put down, but he's protected by the Cheongryong Alliance, my rivals. Killing him directly would start a war I'm not ready to fight. But if he comes after you, and you're under my protection, he'll have to move carefully. That carefulness will make him sloppy. Sloppy men make mistakes. So I'm bait. Your incentive, Taeyang corrected, turning to face her fully. And in exchange for that role, you get what you actually need. Safety, invisibility, and time to figure out your next move. Dai-Yun tells me you've been in Seoul for 11 months, working under the table, sending money back to Lagos for your mother's medical treatments. Lung disease, correct? Aaliyah's expression didn't shift, but her fingers curled slightly at her sides. You researched me. I research everyone who enters my world. Your mother, Kioma James, age 57, diagnosed with pulmonary fibrosis 14 months ago. Your remittances stopped 6 weeks ago when you had to go underground. She's been selling family jewelry to afford medication. Tai Yang's voice remained neutral, but something in his eyes suggested he understood the particular cruelty of that helplessness. I've already wired 30 million won to the medical account you'd been using. It's enough for a year of treatment, possibly 2 if managed well. The floor seemed to tilt beneath Aaliyah's feet. 30 million won, more than she could have sent in 3 years of work. Why? The question escaped before she could stop it. Tai Yang returned to his desk, retrieving a slim folder. Because I need you functional, not distracted by guilt or grief, and because... He paused, an unusual hesitation for a man who commanded with absolute certainty. Because I know what it's like to watch someone fade while you're powerless to stop it. He slid the folder across the desk. Aaliyah opened it to find a single photograph. A young woman, perhaps 19 or 20, with Tai Yang's same sharp features and a smile that radiated warmth the man before her had never shown. Park Min-seo, my younger sister. She died 7 years ago from complications of lupus. Yeah, I was building my empire, consolidating power, eliminating rivals. I told myself I was doing it for her, to give her the life she deserved. But I was lying. I was doing it for me. And by the time I had the resources to afford the experimental treatments she needed, her kidneys had failed. She died in my arms in a hospital I now own, surrounded by doctors I could have hired years earlier if I'd chosen differently. Aaliyah studied the photograph, then Tai Yang's carefully blank expression. This was the crack in the armor. The wound that never healed. I'm sorry for your loss. Don't be. It taught me that power without purpose is just elaborate suicide. Tai Yang closed the folder gently, almost reverently. Your mother will receive care. You'll remain here until Huang is dealt with, which I estimate will take 4 to 6 months based on current intelligence. During that time, you'll maintain this penthouse, prepare meals, and yes, occasionally bear witness to the business conducted here. In return, you live, your mother lives, and when this is over, you'll have enough money to start over anywhere you choose. It was a transaction. Clean, logical, mutually beneficial. Everything in Aaliyah's life had taught her to look for the hidden cost, the unspoken price. But standing in this glass tower with a man who'd just confessed his deepest failure, she made a choice based on instinct honed in Lagos streets and Seoul back alleys. I accept, but I need to know one thing. When the danger comes, and it will come, do I run or do I adapt? Taeyang's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. You adapt. Always adapt. Running only works until you run out of road. Good, Aaliyah said, because I've been running for 11 months and I'm tired of looking over my shoulder. Then welcome to the Baco faction, Miss James. Your quarters are on the east wing, 3rd door. You'll start tomorrow at 7. Tonight, sleep. You'll need it. Aaliyah turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. Mr. Park, that moment when I walked in, when your hand shook and you spilled the whiskey, what were you thinking about? Taeyang's expression shuddered completely, the vulnerability disappearing like smoke. Nothing you need to concern yourself with. She nodded, accepting the lie because pushing would be foolish. But as she walked down the hallway to her new quarters, she understood something crucial. Park Taeyang's isolation wasn't protection. It was a prison he'd built himself, and somehow she'd just been handed a key. The next morning arrived with Seoul's typical autumn crispness, the city waking beneath a sky the color of brushed steel. Aaliyah's quarters were larger than the apartment she'd shared with 3 other women in Itaewon. A bedroom with an actual queen-sized bed, a bathroom with a rainfall shower, and a small sitting area with a window overlooking the Gangnam skyline. She'd slept fitfully, dreams mixing memories of Lagos markets with the cold precision of Taeyang's office. At 6:30, she rose, showered, and dressed in the simple black uniform Da-eun had provided, tailored pants, a fitted blouse, and shoes designed for long hours on her feet. The penthouse was silent when she emerged. 3,200 square feet of minimalist luxury, all clean lines, neutral colors, and expensive emptiness. The main living area flowed into an open kitchen equipped with appliances that cost more than most people's cars. Everything gleamed with the sterile perfection of spaces maintained but not lived in. Aaliyah found the kitchen notebook Da-eun had mentioned, a leather-bound journal detailing Taeyang's preferences. He took coffee at exactly 7:15, black, with 2 specific sugar cubes from a Japanese brand she'd never heard of. Breakfast was simple: rice, grilled fish, myeokguk seaweed soup, kimchi. The precision of it reminded her of military rations, functional fuel rather than pleasure. She prepared everything with the efficiency she'd learned working in Lagos restaurants during university, before the economy had collapsed and jobs had evaporated. The coffee brewed, filling the kitchen with rich darkness. The fish sizzled on the grill, its skin crisping perfectly. At exactly 7:14, Taeyang emerged from the master bedroom wing. He'd showered, his black hair still slightly damp, dressed in another immaculate suit, charcoal gray this time, with a white shirt and no tie. His face showed no trace of last night's vulnerability, but Aaliyah noticed the way his left hand flexed slightly, a subtle tremor quickly controlled. "Good morning, Mr. Park." She set the coffee precisely where the notebook indicated, on the right side of the breakfast bar. "Good morning." His eyes scanned the meal she'd prepared, and something almost like approval flickered across his features. "You read the preferences." "I read everything I'm given. Saves time." He sat taking the coffee first. The silence stretched. Odd, but it wasn't uncomfortable, more like 2 people learning the rhythm of a new arrangement. Aaliyah moved through the kitchen, cleaning as he ate, her movements efficient and unobtrusive. "You'll meet the others today," Taeyang said after finishing half the soup. "My inner circle. They'll be curious about you, possibly hostile. The Baeko faction isn't accustomed to outsiders, especially not foreign women in my personal space. How should I handle that?" "However you see fit, as long as it doesn't involve violence." He paused, reconsidering. "Unless they initiate, then respond proportionally." Aaliyah turned to face him. "You're testing them, or me?" "Both. My lieutenants need to understand that my protection means something. And I need to see how you navigate situations where I'm not present to intervene." Taeyang set down his chopsticks with quiet finality. "They'll arrive at 9 for our weekly strategic meeting. You'll serve tea, observe, and say nothing unless directly addressed. What you hear during these meetings cannot leave this penthouse. The penalty for betrayal is immediate and absolute. Do you understand?" "Perfectly. Good. One more thing." His dark eyes met hers with uncomfortable intensity. "If at any point you feel unsafe here, from me or anyone else, there's a panic button installed in your quarters behind the bathroom mirror. It connects directly to Da-eun's security team. Use it if needed." The gesture surprised her more than the elaborate breakfast preferences or the encrypted files. This was care disguised as procedure. "Thank you. But I should tell you, I don't scare easily. Lagos taught me that fear is just information. You feel it, process it, and act anyway." Something shifted in Taeyang's expression, recognition perhaps of a kindred adaptation to dangerous worlds. "Then you'll do well here, Miss James." The meeting began at precisely 9 a.m. Aaliyah had prepared the conference room, a glass-walled space adjacent to Taeyang's office, dominated by a black marble table that seated 12. She'd set out tea service for 6. The delicate porcelain, arranged according to Korean business etiquette she'd studied obsessively during her months in Seoul. The inner circle arrived in a careful procession. First came a woman in her late 40s, her silver-streaked hair pulled into a severe bun, she wearing a tailored navy suit that screamed old money and older connections. She studied Aaliyah with the clinical assessment of someone trained to identify threats and assets with equal precision. "Lee Hye-jin," Taeyang introduced from his position at the head of the table. "She manages our financial networks and political relationships. If it involves money or power, Hye-jin controls it." The woman offered a minimal nod. The African maid Da-eun mentioned. Her Korean was precise, clearly not intended for Aaliyah to understand, but Aaliyah had been studying the language through apps and overheard conversations for months. "I prefer housekeeper," Aaliyah replied in carefully accented Korean. "But the woman who makes excellent tea works too." Ye-jin's eyebrows rose fractionally, surprise and perhaps respect. But next came two men who moved like synchronized weapons. Brothers, Aaliyah guessed from their similar features: sharp cheekbones, athletic builds, matching scars along their left forearms. Both wore expensive casual clothes that failed to hide the tension in their frames. "Kang Woo-jin and Kang Min-ho," Taeyang continued. "Security and enforcement. If someone needs to be found, persuaded, or eliminated, they handle it." The brothers studied her with predatory interest. Woo-jin, the slightly taller one, spoke first. "She's pretty. Good curves. You finally decided to enjoy your position, Hyung-nim?" The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "She's here in a professional capacity." Taeyang's voice carried lethal softness. "And you'll address her with the same respect you'd show any member of this organization. Am I clear?" Woo-jin's smirk faded. "Clear, Hyung-nim." The fourth arrival was younger, maybe 25, with the nervous energy of someone brilliant and fully aware of it. He carried a laptop and 2 phones, his fingers constantly moving even when still. Baek Jun-ho. Intelligence and technology. He knows everything happening in Seoul's underworld before it happens. Taeyang's introduction carried a note of genuine appreciation. Jun-ho barely glanced at Aaliyah, already absorbed in whatever data streamed across his screens. "Hwang Tae-min's made 3 inquiries about foreign workers in Gangnam this week. No specific description yet, but he's narrowing the search parameters." "Expected," Taeyang said. "Continue monitoring." The final member arrived 15 minutes late. A calculated power play, Aaliyah recognized. But he was older than the others, perhaps 60, with gray hair and the kind of face that had witnessed decades of violence and learned to enjoy it. "Forgive my delay," he said in Korean, thick with a Busan accent. "Traffic was murder." The way he emphasized the last word suggested personal involvement in making it so. "Gwan Deoksu." Taeyang's voice held less warmth for this introduction. "He handles our port operations and international logistics." Deoksu's eyes found Aaliyah and lingered inappropriately. "So this is the pet you're hiding from Hwang. She's exotic. I can see the appeal." Aaliyah poured his tea with steady hands, saying nothing. But she noted the way Taeyang's jaw tightened, the subtle shift in his posture that suggested violence barely leashed. "Miss James is under my direct protection," Taeyang said quietly. "Any disrespect shown to her is disrespect shown to me. I trust everyone at this table understands the consequences of that." The meeting proceeded with brutal efficiency. They discussed territories, revenue streams, and the delicate balance of power between the Baeko faction and their rivals. Aaliyah served tea, cleared cups, and listened with the focused attention of someone cataloging every detail. She learned that the Cheongryong Alliance, their primary rivals, controlled most of Seoul's northern districts and harbored ambitions to expand south. That Hwang Tae-min, the loan shark hunting her, was actually a minor player being propped up by Cheongryong leadership to destabilize Baeko operations in foreign worker communities. She learned that Lee Hae-jin was skimming 2% off the top of their money laundering operations, a fact everyone at the table knew and ignored because her political connections were worth the theft. She learned that the Kang brothers had killed 17 people in the past year, always with identical methods to create a psychological signature that terrified rivals. She learned that Baek Jun-ho had hacked the Seoul Metropolitan Police mainframe and could erase or fabricate evidence at will. And she learned that Gwan Deoksu was planning something the others didn't know about. She saw it in the way he smiled when they discussed the port schedules, a private satisfaction that didn't match the conversation. The meeting lasted 2 hours. When the inner circle finally departed, Taeyang remained seated. His fingers steepled beneath his chin. "Your assessment," he said without looking at her. Aaliyah continued clearing the conference table. "Hyejin respects you but considers herself your equal. The Kang brothers are loyal attack dogs who'll die for you without question. Jun-ho is completely absorbed in his digital world and probably neurodivergent in ways that make him brilliant and vulnerable. And Deoksu is stealing from you or planning to." Now Taeyang looked at her, genuine surprise breaking through his usual control. "Explain, Deoksu." When you discussed the Incheon port schedules, everyone else showed normal interest. Deoksu smiled like a man who knows a secret joke. Either he's already altered the schedules for personal profit, or he's planning to. His late arrival was a test to see if you'd tolerate disrespect. You passed his test by correcting it, but that just means he'll be more careful next time. Taeyang stood slowly, moving to the windows. The Seoul skyline sprawled beneath them, glass and steel and millions of lives intersecting in patterns only people like him tried to control. Deoksu has been with the organization for 23 years. He served my predecessor and transferred his loyalty when I took power. His port operations generate 30% of our revenue. That's why he's dangerous, Aaliyah said. He thinks he's indispensable. Indispensable people stop being careful. Silence filled the space between them, weighted with consideration. You see patterns? Taeyang observed. It's not just intelligence. You read the currents beneath the surface. Survival skill. In Lagos, you learned to read rooms faster than the rooms could read you. The market vendors who smiled too wide were setting up scams. The police who acted too friendly were fishing for bribes. The family members who visited too often were calculating inheritance. Aaliyah set down the empty teacups. Same patterns, different country. People are people. And what pattern do you see in me? The question hung in the air like a challenge and a confession tangled together. Aaliyah met his eyes directly. A man who built walls so high he forgot how to ask for the door. Taeyang's expression didn't change, but something in his stillness suggested she'd struck bone. Get some rest, Miss James. Tomorrow we have guests who are far less civilized than today's meeting. She left him there, silhouetted against the window. A king surveying a kingdom that couldn't see him bleeding. Which character's loyalty would you question first? Hae Jin's calculated respect, the Kang brothers' violent devotion, Junho's digital isolation, or Deoksu's veteran contempt? Drop your instinct below. The days settled into a rhythm of dangerous normalcy. Aaliyah woke at 6, prepared Taeyang's breakfast with precision, and navigated the careful dance of maintaining a space that was lived in but never messy. She learned his patterns. The way he worked until 3 a.m., the nightmares that brought him to the kitchen at odd hours seeking the comfort of routine, the phone calls he took on the balcony when the conversations required distance from witnesses. She also learned the code beneath the code. When Taeyang said, "Prepare the guest room," it meant someone would be visiting who required impression management, usually politicians or legitimate businessmen who needed plausible deniability. When he said, "I'll be dining out," it meant violence was scheduled, and he wanted her nowhere near the aftermath. When he said nothing at all, just handed her a credit card and an address, it meant someone needed help he couldn't officially provide. Medical care for injured foot soldiers, payments to widows of men killed in faction business, anonymous donations to causes his sister had supported. 3 weeks into her employment, the first real test arrived. Aaliyah was restocking the kitchen at 11 p.m. when she heard the private elevator chime. When Taeyang wasn't due back until morning, he'd gone to Busan for negotiations with a shipping magnate who controlled routes to Japan. The Kang brothers emerged first, carrying a man between them. Blood soaked through his shirt, dripping onto the white marble floor in a pattern that would require specialized cleaning. "Bathroom now," Wu Jin barked, not at Aaliyah but to his brother. They hauled the injured man past her without acknowledgement. Behind them came Baek Junho, his laptop bag in one hand and a first aid kit in the other, looking pale but focused. "Miss James," he said, his voice tight, "we need towels, rubbing alcohol if Hyung Nim keeps it, and you didn't see anything." Aaliyah's heart hammered, but her voice emerged steady. "Towels are in the linen closet, second shelf. My medical supplies are under the guest bathroom sink. Hyung Nim keeps a full trauma kit there. And I definitely didn't see 3 men who aren't here carrying someone who doesn't exist." Junho's stressed expression cracked into a brief smile. "You're quick. I'm employed. There's a difference." She gathered the supplies and brought them to the guest bathroom, where the Kang brothers had laid the injured man in the bathtub. Up close, she could see he was young, maybe 22, with the kind of street-hardened face that said he'd been in this life since childhood. The wound was a knife slash across his ribs, deep but not immediately fatal if treated properly. "Can any of you stitch?" Aaliyah asked. Minho looked up, surprised. "You know how? My mother was a nurse before the economy collapsed. I learned the basics." She knelt beside the tub, assessing the damage with the clinical detachment her mother had taught her. "This needs cleaning, stitching, and antibiotics. You have the supplies?" Wu Jin opened the trauma kit, revealing medical-grade equipment that explained how the Baeko faction handled injuries without hospital records. "Do it," he said simply. Aaliyah worked with steady hands, cleaning the wound while the injured man, his name was Park Sung-min, she learned from his pained murmuring, gritted his teeth against the agony. The stitching took 20 minutes, each suture placed with the precision her mother had drilled into her during long afternoons in their Lagos apartment. "He'll need rest and antibiotics every 6 hours," she said when finished. "No heavy movement for at least a week or the stitches will tear." "Hyung Nim will want to know you helped," Minho said, respect clear in his voice. Hyung Nim will want to know what happened that put one of his people in a bathtub bleeding, Aaliyah countered, which isn't my business. I just cleaned the bathroom. The brothers exchanged glances, some private communication that ended with matching nods. You're all right for an outsider, Woo Jin said, which from him was apparently high praise. They carried Sungmin to the guest room while Junho helped Aaliyah clean the bathroom. The work was meditative, scrubbing blood from tile grout, mopping marble until it gleamed again. Why'd you help? Junho asked as they worked. You could have called Hyung Nim, let him handle it. Aaliyah wrung out the mop. Watching pink water swirl down the drain. In Lagos, when violence found our neighborhood, we didn't wait for officials. We helped each other because that's what survival required. This isn't different. That boy was bleeding. I could stop it, so I did. Most people freeze when confronted with blood. Most people haven't watched their mother work emergency shifts in underfunded hospitals. She met Junho's eyes. I'm not most people. No, he agreed quietly. You're really not. Taeyang returned the next afternoon, his Busan negotiations apparently successful based on the satisfied set of his shoulders. He found Aaliyah in the kitchen, preparing his late lunch. I heard about last night, he said without preamble. I'm sure you did. Sungmin is one of our younger soldiers. He was jumped by Cheongryong thugs in Itaewon. One managed to fight his way out but took a blade in the process. My brothers brought him here because the safe house physician was handling another emergency. Taeyang leaned against the counter, studying her. They said you stitched him up without being asked. He was bleeding in your bathtub. Seemed rude to let him continue. Most domestic staff would have panicked or called the authorities. Aaliyah set down the knife she'd been using to slice vegetables. Mr. Park, I left my country because staying meant watching my mother die slowly from lack of medical care. I came to Seoul and worked jobs that demanded I pretend not to see the illegal workers being exploited, the women being trafficked, the corruption that made survival a luxury. I learned a long time ago that authority doesn't mean justice, it just means power. So no, I didn't call anyone. I did what needed doing. Taeyang's expression shifted through several emotions before settling on something that looked like understanding. The money I sent for your mother's treatment, has it been adequate? More than adequate. Her doctors say the new medication is working. She might actually see her 60th birthday. Aaliyah's voice caught slightly on the last words, emotion breaking through her practiced calm. Good. He pushed off from the counter. I'm increasing your salary by 5 million won monthly. You've proven yourself more valuable than standard domestic service. I don't need... It's not about need. It's about recognizing contribution. You stabilized a potentially dangerous situation, kept my brothers calm, and maintained operational security. That has value beyond housekeeping. Taeyang's tone carried finality. Additionally, you'll begin sitting in on all strategic meetings, not just serving tea. I want your observations on personnel and situations. Aaliyah stared at him. You're making me part of your inner circle. I'm making you an asset I trust. There's a difference, but the practical result is the same. You'll know more, risk more, and be protected accordingly. He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his features. I've learned that the people who see clearly in crisis are rare. You've proven you're one of them. Before Aaliyah could respond, Taeyang's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and every line of his body went rigid. What is it? Huang Tai mean? Taeyang's voice had gone cold. He's issued a public bounty. 50 million won for information on a black woman who worked in Hongdae 6 months ago, possibly connected to the deaths of his enforcers. He's included a description that matches you exactly, down to your height and the scar on your left shoulder. The kitchen floor seemed to tilt. How would he know about the scar? Someone who saw you closely talked, maybe a coworker, maybe someone from your apartment building. Taeyang was already moving, pulling out his phone to make rapid-fire calls. We're going dark protocol. You don't leave this penthouse under any circumstances. I'm pulling additional security and... No. He stopped mid-dial. Excuse me? Aaliyah set down the vegetables with deliberate calm, her mind racing through options. Running makes me pray. I've been prey for 11 months. It doesn't work. So we do the opposite, which is, we make me visible. She met his skeptical gaze. You said Huang is being propped up by the Cheongryong Alliance to destabilize your operations. If I'm bait, then let's use me as bait, but on our terms. We leak that I'm under Baekho protection, that any move against me is a direct challenge to you. Force Huang to either back down or escalate publicly. Either option weakens him. Taeyang studied her for a long moment. That's exceptionally dangerous. Life is dangerous. Strategy is about choosing which risks serve your goals. Aaliyah smiled without humor. Besides, I'm tired of being afraid. Fear is information. Let's use it. Something shifted in Taeyang's expression. Respect, surprise, and a hint of the loneliness that drove him to his balcony at midnight. You're certain? I've never been more certain of anything. Then we proceed. But you follow my protocols exactly. One mistake, and you die, probably painfully. Understood. Tai Yang made the calls, his voice sharp and commanding as he set the pieces in motion. Aaliyah returned to preparing lunch, her hands steady despite the adrenaline singing through her veins. She'd just declared war on a gangster who killed people for sport, but for the first time since leaving Lagos, she felt like herself again. Not a victim, not a refugee, but a woman who'd learned to dance in the shadows and refused to apologize for surviving. That night, the news spread through Seoul's underworld like fire through dry grass. Park Tae-yang's foreign housekeeper was untouchable. Anyone who moved against her would face the full weight of the Baeko faction's retribution. The message was delivered through channels both subtle and overt, whispered in gambling dens, announced in protected markets, and spelled out in the bodies of two low-level Cheongryong thugs found in a Gangnam alley with their hands removed, a signature punishment for those who reached for what didn't belong to them. Aaliyah watched the city from the penthouse windows as night fell, the neon signs bleeding color across glass and concrete. Somewhere out there, Hwang Tae-min was receiving the message, calculating his response, deciding whether pride or survival mattered more. She'd become a piece on a chessboard she barely understood 3 weeks ago. Now she was learning to move herself. Second thoughts? Tai Yang's voice came from behind her, and quiet in the darkened living room. Constant thoughts, Aaliyah replied without turning, but not second ones. I committed to this path. I don't step backward. He moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could smell the expensive cologne he wore, and something beneath it. The metallic tang of stress, of adrenaline, managed but not eliminated. When I was 26, Tai Yang said, his voice carrying a strange vulnerability. My predecessor, Yoon Dae-jung, told me the difference between soldiers and leaders. Soldiers follow orders and hope to survive. Leaders give orders knowing they'll outlive the people who trust them. I didn't understand then. I thought leadership was about strength. And now? Now I understand it's about isolation. Every decision I make kills someone or saves someone. Every alliance I forge requires betraying a previous understanding. Every day I wake up alone in this penthouse surrounded by people who die for me, but who I can never truly know. He paused, his reflection ghostly in the window glass. Min Seo, my sister, was the last person who saw me as human rather than useful. When she died, that part of me died with her. Aaliyah absorbed this confession, understanding it for what it was. Not a plea for sympathy, but a statement of fact from someone unaccustomed to speaking his internal truth. My father died when I was 15, she offered. Undiagnosed heart condition, collapsed in our kitchen while my mother was at work. I was the one who found him. I was the one who called for help that came too late. For months afterward, I felt like I was performing life rather than living it. Unsmiling when expected, crying at appropriate times, but never actually feeling connected to anything. She turned to face Tai Yang directly. Until I realized that disconnection was a choice. Not a conscious one, but still a choice. I could keep performing safety or I could risk feeling real things again. Which did you choose? I'm standing in a Mafia penthouse having declared war on a loan shark who wants me dead. What do you think? Tai Yang's lips curved into something almost approaching a genuine smile. I think you chose poorly, but with conviction. Story of my life. They stood in companionable silence, two people who'd learned to survive by building walls, discovering that walls only worked if you occasionally opened windows. Tomorrow, Tai Yang said eventually, Hwang will likely respond. It won't be subtle. He's a rabid dog backed into a corner by his Cheongryong masters. Cornered dogs bite. Then we'll bite back harder. You're very comfortable with violence for someone who worked in restaurants and clubs. Aaliyah's expression hardened. Lagos isn't Seoul. The violence there doesn't wear suits and speak in corporate euphemisms. It's machetes in the streets, police checkpoints where bribes are demanded at gunpoint, neighbors who disappear overnight because they angered the wrong person. I watched my uncle's store burn because he refused to pay protection money. I saw friends beaten for being in the wrong neighborhood at the wrong time. So yes, I'm comfortable with violence. I just prefer to direct it rather than endure it. Tai Yang studied her with new intensity. You're wasted as a housekeeper. I'm surviving as a housekeeper. There's dignity in that. There's more dignity in using your full capabilities. After this situation with Hwang resolves, I'd like to formally offer you a position in the organization. Not domestic service, strategic operations. You read people in situations better than most of my trained personnel. The offer hung between them, weighted with implications that extended far beyond employment. Let's survive the next week first, Aaliyah said carefully. Then we can discuss career advancement. Fair enough. Tai Yang's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his expression shifted into cold professionalism. The Kang brothers just spotted Huang's people conducting surveillance on this building. They're mapping entry points and security patterns. How long until they move? 48 to 72 hours. No, according to Junho's analysis of their operational patterns. They'll want to plan carefully. Hitting me directly is suicide, but if they can extract you during a vulnerability window, they can claim ignorance and force me into a position where retaliation looks like overreaction. Aaliyah's mind raced through scenarios. What if we give them what they want? Absolutely not. Hear me out. She moved to the dining table, grabbing a notepad and sketching quick diagrams. They need a vulnerability window. We create one. A scheduled event where I'm outside the penthouse, minimally guarded, apparently exposed. They move on it, and we counter-trap them. Instead of defending, we attack their attack. Tai Yang joined her at the table, studying her rough sketches. Gee, you're suggesting we use you as bait in the most literal sense. I'm suggesting we turn their plan against them. They expect me to hide, so I don't hide. I become visible, tempting, and when they reach for me, you close the trap. She met his skeptical gaze. You said Huang is a rabid dog backed into a corner. Dogs respond to prey. Let's give him prey with teeth. For a long moment, Tai Yang said nothing, his analytical mind clearly working through variables and risks. Finally, he nodded slowly. There's a charity gala in 3 days at the Shilla Hotel. Legitimate business community, politicians, some underworld figures maintaining respectable covers. I'm expected to attend. It's important for maintaining my legitimate business relationships. I could bring you as my personal assistant. And Huang's people? We'll be watching for exactly that kind of opportunity. You'd be in a public space, surrounded by civilians, theoretically protected by social convention rather than armed guards. Tai Yang's expression grew darker. They'd move during transport. The drive to or from the hotel. Vehicles are isolated, controllable spaces where violence can happen quickly. So we prepare for that. Decoy vehicles, armed response teams in tactical positions, and me carrying enough personal protection to hold out until help arrives. Aaliyah's voice carried certainty born from analysis rather than bravado. I'm not helpless, and I'm very motivated to stay alive. Can you shoot? I've handled my uncle's hunting rifle, not expert level, but competent enough. Tai Yang stood, walking to what appeared to be a decorative panel in the living room wall. His fingers pressed a concealed latch, and the panel slid open to reveal a compact armory, handguns, ammunition, tactical equipment arranged with military precision. He selected a small pistol, checking it with practiced efficiency before setting it on the table between them. Walther PPK, compact, reliable, minimal recoil, 8-round magazine. If we're doing this, you'll carry it, and tomorrow, the Kang brothers will drill you on proper usage until muscle memory replaces thinking. His dark eyes held hers. But understand, if you draw this weapon, you'd better be prepared to use it. Hesitation gets you killed. Aaliyah picked up the pistol, feeling its weight, the cold metal a promise and a threat in equal measure. I understand. Do you? This isn't theoretical anymore. You're proposing to walk into a kill zone deliberately. Even with precautions, there's substantial risk you'll be seriously injured or dead before we can extract you. I survived Lagos. I survived 11 months underground in Seoul. I'll survive this. She set the pistol down carefully. Besides, what's the alternative? Keep hiding until Huang gives up or dies of old age? That's not survival. That's just slow-motion defeat. Tai Yang's expression shifted through several emotions before settling on something that looked like reluctant admiration. You're either incredibly brave or spectacularly foolish. Why not both? This time his smile was real, brief but genuine. Get some sleep, Miss James. Tomorrow your education in tactical violence begins. Looking forward to it, Mr. Park. The next 2 days transformed Aaliyah from civilian to combatant. The Kang brothers arrived at dawn, converting the penthouse gym into a makeshift shooting range using ballistic gel targets and sound suppression equipment that probably violated numerous Korean firearms laws. Woo Jin handled the technical instruction: grip, stance, sight alignment, breath control. His teaching style was brusque but effective, correcting her form with minimal words and maximum precision. Minho focused on tactical scenarios, moving while shooting, clearing malfunctions, stress fire drills where he'd suddenly yell or create distractions to simulate combat conditions. You're a natural, Woo Jin admitted after she placed 6 of 8 rounds in the target's center mass from 15 meters. Good instincts, steady hands. You've definitely handled weapons before. My uncle took me hunting when I was 12. He said girls should know how to protect themselves because the world didn't care about fairness. Aaliyah ejected the magazine, cleared the chamber, and set the pistol down with proper safety consciousness. He was right. Between shooting drills, Junho briefed her on digital security, how to recognize surveillance, what to do if separated from protective details, emergency communication protocols. He'd loaded her phone with encrypted apps that could summon help or destroy data with simple commands. "You're taking this very seriously," Aaliyah observed during a brief rest period. Junho looked up from his laptop, his usually distracted expression focused entirely on her. "Young-nim values you. That makes your safety important to all of us. But plus," he hesitated, then continued, "you're the first person in this organization who's treated me like a human instead of a useful tool. That matters. You are human, Junho. A brilliant one with terrible posture and a caffeine addiction, but human nonetheless." He smiled, a rare expression that made him look younger than his years. "See? That's what I mean." Lee Hae-jin visited that afternoon, ostensibly to review financial reports, but actually to assess Aaliyah's preparation. "I've arranged for appropriate attire for the gala," she said, laying out garment bags on the guest room bed. "You'll need to look the part of Tai Yang's personal assistant, professional but memorable. Your appearance will be part of the bait." Aaliyah examined the dresses, elegant, sophisticated, designed to showcase rather than conceal her curves. "These are expensive." "Everything associated with Tai Yang is expensive. It projects power and success." Hae-jin's expression softened marginally. "I initially opposed bringing you into the organization. Foreigners in our world create complications, but you've proven competent and loyal, rare qualities. I respect that. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. What you're proposing tomorrow is tactically sound but existentially risky. Even with all our preparations, there are variables we can't control. A competent sniper, a car bomb, a mass assault that overwhelms our response capacity." Hae-jin met her eyes directly. "Are you prepared to die for this gambit?" Aaliyah considered the question seriously. "I'm prepared to risk death to stop running. There's a difference. Not from the grave, there isn't. True, but from here. Living in fear versus living with purpose feels like the only choice that matters." Hae-jin nodded slowly. "Then wear the black dress with the slit. If you're going to be bait, you might as well be memorable bait." That evening, Tai Yang called the inner circle together for final operational review. They gathered in the conference room, the Seoul night sprawling beyond the windows like a glittering web. Junho projected tactical maps and timelines onto the glass walls, transforming the space into a war room. "Primary scenario," Tai Yang began, his voice carrying absolute authority. "Huang's people attempt extraction during our departure from the hotel. Likely method, staged accident forcing our vehicle to stop, followed by rapid assault team to seize Miss James. Our counter, 3 decoy vehicles exit simultaneously through different routes. The actual transport carries myself and Miss James with Woo Jin driving, Min Ho riding tactical, and 2 chase vehicles providing mobile protection. Secondary scenario," Woo Jin picked up the briefing. "They penetrate the hotel itself. Unlikely but possible if they've compromised service staff. Counter, Junho has hacked the hotel security system and will monitor all access points. Any anomalous movement triggers lockdown protocols in our rapid extraction." "Tertiary scenario," Minho continued. "They're smarter than we think and hit us before we even reach the hotel. Counter, we vary our departure time and route, maintain communications blackout except on encrypted channels, and assume all public infrastructure is compromised." Aaliyah listened to the layers of planning, impressed by the thoroughness but also aware of the central truth. No plan survived contact with chaos. "What if," she interjected, "they don't move at all? What if Huang is smart enough to recognize the trap and simply doesn't take the bait?" Tai Yang smiled coldly. "Then we've wasted an evening at a tedious charity gala, but you've been seen publicly under Baeko protection. That alone sends the message we need. Touching you means war, and we're prepared for war. Huang either backs down, which weakens his position with the Cheongryong alliance, or he escalates, which gives us justification to eliminate him outright. Win-win scenario," Aaliyah said. All scenarios are win scenarios if you plan correctly and execute ruthlessly." Tai Yang's gaze swept the room. Questions? Concerns? Guan Deoksu, who'd been conspicuously silent throughout the planning, finally spoke. "This is a significant deployment of resources for one foreign woman. Are we certain the return justifies the investment?" The temperature in the room dropped. "The return," Tai Yang said with lethal quiet, "is demonstrating that Baeko protection means something absolute, that our word is law and violations are met with overwhelming force. Miss James's specific identity is irrelevant. The principle is everything. Am I clear, Deoksu?" The older man inclined his head, but Aaliyah caught the flash of resentment in his eyes. Another data point confirming her initial assessment. Guan Deoksu was planning something. Either and she was somehow part of it. The meeting concluded with final equipment checks and contingency protocols. As the inner circle dispersed, Taiyang held Aaliyah back. "You caught that with Deoksu," he said quietly. "Hard to miss. He's been undermining you subtly since I arrived. Little challenges to your authority, questioning resource allocation, arriving late to meetings, classic power play tactics. He's also been with this organization longer than I've been alive. His port operations are genuinely crucial to our revenue streams, which is exactly why his betrayal when it comes will hurt worst." Aaliyah moved to the windows, watching the city breathe. "You know he's turning. The question is whether you eliminate him proactively or wait for him to reveal his full hand." Spoken like someone familiar with organizational treachery. "I worked in Nigerian corporate culture before coming here. Same games, slightly different rules." She turned to face him. "But here's what I don't understand. Why keep him close if you know he's a threat?" Taiyang joined her at the window, their reflections merging in the glass. "Because eliminating him without proof triggers paranoia in the other lieutenants. They start wondering if loyalty means anything, if I'll turn on them based on suspicion rather than evidence. That erodes the organization from within faster than any external threat. So you let him operate until he makes a mistake big enough to justify removal." "Exactly. Which is why tomorrow's operation serves multiple purposes. If Deoksu is working with Huang or the Cheongryong Alliance, he'll make a move that reveals his allegiance. And if he's simply a bitter old man clinging to relevance, he'll fall in line when we demonstrate our capability." Aaliyah processed this layered strategy, appreciating the cold ruthlessness of it. "You're using me to flush out multiple threats simultaneously. I'm using a situation to maximize information and strategic advantage. You agreed to be bait. I'm simply ensuring we catch all the fish circling the hook." Taiyang's expression remained neutral, but something in his voice suggested discomfort with his own calculation. "If you want to withdraw, now is the time." "No, I'm committed." Aaliyah met his eyes directly. "But I need you to understand something. I'm not doing this because I trust you completely or because I believe in your organization's goals. I'm doing this because it's the best option for my survival and my mother's continued treatment. The moment that calculus changes, my loyalty changes with it." Instead of offense, Taiyang looked almost relieved. "Good. Honest motivations are more reliable than loyal ones. I'd rather work with someone who's transparently self-interested than someone who claims devotion but harbors hidden agendas. Then we understand each other." "We do." He paused, then added quietly, "For what it's worth, I'm glad you're here, Miss James. Not just for your strategic utility, but because—" He stopped, the vulnerability he'd been approaching retreating behind professional walls. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be taxing." Aaliyah wanted to push, to ask what he'd been about to say, but recognized the moment had closed. Instead, she nodded and headed to her quarters. That night, sleep came slowly. She lay in the expensive sheets staring at the ceiling, her mind cycling through scenarios and contingencies. The Walther PPK rested on her nightstand, loaded and ready, a promise that tomorrow's performance wouldn't be entirely theatrical. Somewhere in Seoul, Hwang Tai-min was making his own plans, calculating angles, preparing to reach for prey that would reveal itself as predator. And somewhere in this very penthouse, possibly, Guan Deoksu was sending encrypted messages to allies who saw Taiyang's protection of a foreign woman as weakness to be exploited. The pieces were moving. The board was set. Tomorrow, this violence would answer the question of who'd planned better. Aaliyah finally slept near dawn, her dreams mixing Lagos marketplaces with Seoul skyscrapers, her father's collapsed body with Taiyang's isolated silhouette, the weight of the pistol with the weight of choices that couldn't be unmade. When she woke 3 hours later, the game had already begun. The Shilla Hotel rose from Seoul's landscape like a crown of glass and steel, its architecture blending traditional Korean elegance with aggressive modernity. The charity gala, officially supporting children's hospitals but actually serving as a networking event for Seoul's elite to launder reputations and forge alliances, would fill the grand ballroom with politicians, corporate executives, and carefully disguised criminals who'd learned to wear legitimacy like expensive cologne. Aaliyah stood before the full-length mirror in her quarters, barely recognizing herself. Hye-jin's choice, the black dress with the strategic slit, transformed her from housekeeper to presence. The fabric hugged her curves with architectural precision, the neckline modest enough for respectability, but cut to showcase the strength of her shoulders and the elegant line of her neck. Her natural hair, usually pulled back practically, had been styled into defined curls that framed her face like a crown. Minimal jewelry. Diamond studs Tai Yang had provided, a simple watch that was actually a GPS tracker, completed the image. She looked powerful, desirable, worth fighting for. Perfect bait. "You clean up well," Taeyang's voice came from the doorway. When Aaliyah turned to find him in a midnight blue tuxedo that probably cost more than her family's annual income in Lagos. He'd styled his hair back, highlighting the sharp planes of his face, and the formal attire somehow made him look more dangerous rather than civilized, like violence wrapped in silk. "You don't look bad yourself," she replied, checking the small clutch purse that concealed the Walther PPK. "Though I prefer the 3 a.m. disheveled businessman look, more human. Tonight isn't about being human. It's about projecting invincibility." He crossed the room, retrieving a velvet box from his jacket. One final touch. Inside the box rested a necklace, a single black pearl suspended on a platinum chain, surrounded by small diamonds that caught the light like trapped stars. "This is too much," Aaliyah protested. This is strategy. Black pearls are rare, expensive, and symbolically significant in Korean culture. They represent wisdom earned through hardship. You wearing this sends a message that you're not just under my protection, you're valued as an asset. Taeyang removed the necklace from its box. "May I?" Aaliyah turned, feeling his fingers brush her neck as he fastened the clasp. The pearl rested just above her collarbone, its weight a physical reminder of the role she was playing. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Don't thank me yet. We haven't survived the evening." Taeyang stepped back, his professional mask firmly in place, but something vulnerable lingering in his eyes. Last chance to withdraw. Last chance accepted and declined. "Let's go put on a show." They descended to the parking garage where 3 identical black Mercedes S-Class sedans waited, engines running, windows tinted to opacity. The Kang brothers had organized the deception perfectly. Even Aaliyah couldn't tell which vehicle would actually carry them. Woo Jin appeared from behind the center vehicle, his usual casual attire, replaced by a driver's uniform that failed to hide the tactical vest beneath. "All teams in position," Hung Nim. "Junho confirms hotel security feed is under our control. Chase vehicles are 2 minutes out and emergency extraction routes are clear. No unusual surveillance detected yet, but Huang's people are professionals. They won't show themselves until commitment." "Good. Maintain Protocol Alpha until we reach the hotel, then switch to defensive posture. Any sign of contact? You prioritize Miss James's safety over mine. Clear?" Woo Jin's expression flickered with protest, but he nodded. "Clear." Taeyang handed Aaliyah into the center vehicle, confirming which one was real, and slid in beside her. Minho was already in the passenger seat, his jacket bulging with concealed weapons. As they pulled out of the garage, Aaliyah watched the 2 decoy vehicles peel off in different directions, each carrying security personnel who'd draw attention and split any surveillance effort. "How do you live like this?" she asked as they merged into Gangnam traffic. "Constant threat assessment, every movement calculated, never knowing if today is the day someone successfully kills you?" Taeyang gazed out the window at the neon-soaked streets. "You assume there's an alternative. I was born into this world. My father ran gambling operations in Busan. My uncle controlled labor unions in Incheon. By the time I understood what normal life looked like, I was already too deep to extract myself, so I stopped fighting the current and learned to navigate it instead. But Minseo, your sister, she wasn't part of this life. I tried to keep her separate. Private schools, legitimate friends, a future that didn't involve blood and betrayal." His voice carried old pain. "But the disease didn't care about my plans, and when she needed experimental treatments only available through connections I'd forged in criminal networks, the separation collapsed. She died knowing exactly what I was, hating me for it even while the medicines I'd secured through intimidation and bribery bought her extra months." Aaliyah absorbed this, an understanding clicking into place. "That's why you helped my mother, not just strategy, penance. Perhaps, or perhaps recognition that some debts can never be repaid directly, only forwarded to others who carry similar burdens." Taeyang's eyes met hers. "Either way, your mother receives care. The motivation is irrelevant to the outcome." "Motivation is never irrelevant, it's everything." Before Taeyang could respond, Minho's voice cut through from the front seat. "Contact. 2 vehicles matching Huang's operational profile just entered traffic 3 cars back. They're maintaining distance, but tracking our route." "Expected," Taeyang said calmly. "They're confirming we're actually in this vehicle, not one of the decoys. How long until they commit?" "Depends on their plan," Woo Jin replied from the driver's seat, his eyes constantly scanning mirrors and traffic patterns. If they're hitting us en route, it'll be in the next kilometer. There's a construction zone that narrows lanes and limits escape options. If they're waiting for the return trip, they'll just monitor and withdraw. Aaliyah's heart rate climbed, adrenaline sharpening every sense. She could see the two vehicles Minho had identified, a silver Hyundai and a black Kia, both with multiple occupants moving with the practiced coordination of professional operators. "They're accelerating," Minho announced, "closing the gap." "Here we go," Wu Jin muttered, his hands tensing on the wheel. The Hyundai surged forward, pulling alongside their Mercedes. Aaliyah caught a glimpse of the passenger, young, Korean, with dead eyes that had seen too much violence too early. Then everything happened at once. The Hyundai's rear door flew open. A man leaned out, something metallic in his hands. "Gun!" Minho shouted. Wu Jin yanked the wheel hard right, the Mercedes' performance suspension taking the abuse as they swerved into the adjacent lane. Horns blared, brakes screamed. The Hyundai overshot, its passenger firing 3 wild shots that sparked off the Mercedes' armored body panels. "Armored glass holding," Minho reported, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Multiple hostiles confirmed. This is an active hit." The Kia accelerated from behind, trying to pin them between the two attack vehicles. But Wu Jin drove like violence was a language he spoke fluently, cutting through traffic, using civilian vehicles as mobile shields, accelerating through gaps that shouldn't exist. "Chase Vehicle 1 is engaging the Kia," a voice crackled through the radio. "We'll pull them off your 6. Behind them, one of Baco's protective vehicles slammed into the Kia's rear quarter panel, sending it spinning into a guardrail with a catastrophic crunch of metal and glass. But the Hyundai was still hunting. It cut across 2 lanes, forcing Wu Jin to brake hard or collide with a bus full of civilians. The Mercedes' tires shrieked, the scent of burning rubber filling the cabin even through the air conditioning. "They're trying to stop us," Wu Jin growled. "If we're stationary, they can deploy their assault team." "Don't stop," Taiyang ordered. "Evade." "That's a school bus, young Neum. I said evade. Find another route." Aaliyah made a split-second decision. She grabbed the radio handset. "Chase Vehicle 2. Chica, I need you to create a gap." Hyundai's passenger side. "Right now." A brief hesitation then. "Understood." The second protective vehicle surged forward from behind, clipping the Hyundai's rear bumper with calculated precision. The attack vehicle wobbled, its driver fighting to maintain control, creating a gap of maybe 2 meters between it and the bus. "There," Aaliyah pointed. "Go." Wu Jin didn't question. He punched the accelerator, threading the Mercedes through the impossible gap with centimeters to spare on each side. Metal scraped metal. The side mirror exploded in a shower of glass, but they were through. "Clear of immediate contact," Minho announced. "Hotel is 3 kilometers ahead. I recommend we maintain speed and get inside their perimeter where Huang's people can't follow without exposing themselves." "Agreed," Taiyang said. Then to Aaliyah. "Good call on the gap. How did you know Chase 2 could make that angle?" "I didn't, but sitting still meant certain capture, and moving through the gap meant possible survival. Easy choice." Despite the situation, Taiyang smiled. "You're terrifyingly calm under fire. Panic is a luxury I can't afford." They reached the Shilla Hotel 3 minutes later, the Mercedes screeching into the valet circle with smoke rising from the wheel wells and a scrape along the passenger side that would require complete panel replacement. Hotel security, a mix of legitimate personnel and Baco operators in disguise, immediately surrounded the vehicle, creating a human wall between them and any follow-up attack. Wu Jin killed the engine, his hands finally showing a tremor. "Everyone intact?" "Intact," Taiyang confirmed. He turned to Aaliyah. "You're certain you want to proceed? We could extract right now, return to the penthouse, and call this a successful intelligence gather." Aaliyah checked her appearance in the rearview mirror. Her hair was slightly mussed, her lipstick needed touching up, but otherwise, she looked remarkably composed for someone who'd just survived a vehicular assassination attempt. "We came to send a message. Let's send it properly." She reapplied her lipstick with steady hands, then smiled at Taiyang's reflection. "Besides, I hear the canapes at these events are exceptional." "You're insane." "I'm committed. There's a difference." They emerged from the Mercedes into camera flashes and murmured speculation. Word of the damaged vehicle had already spread. Nothing moved through Seoul's elite circles faster than rumors of violence. Taiyang offered his arm, and Aaliyah took it, allowing him to escort her up the red carpet with the confidence of someone who hadn't just been shot at. The black pearl necklace caught the lights, drawing eyes and questions. "Who is she?" she heard someone whisper in Korean. "Park Taiyang's new woman," another voice speculated. "I heard she's African. He's making a statement." "He's making a mistake. You don't mix business with—" Taiyang's cold glance silenced the speaker mid-sentence. The crowd parted like water before a shark. Inside, the ballroom exceeded expectations. Crystal chandeliers, live orchestra, enough champagne and Kobe beef to feed a small nation. Seoul's elite mingled in carefully choreographed dances of influence, each conversation a negotiation, each smile a calculation. Lee Hee-jin materialized from the crowd, resplendent in a dark green gown that made her look 10 years younger and twice as dangerous. "I heard about the welcome party," she said quietly. "Everyone's intact?" "Everyone who matters," Taeyang replied. Hwang committed 8 personnel to the hit, 3 in the Hyundai, 3 in the Kia, and 2 more providing overwatch. Our chase vehicles neutralized the Kia crew, the Hyundai scattered after losing the initiative, and the Overwatch team withdrew when the operation failed. He'll try again. Let him. We've demonstrated we can't be taken easily. A next attempt will require either much more resources, which he doesn't have, or much more subtlety, which isn't his strength. Taeyang accepted a champagne flute from a passing waiter, handing it to Aaliyah. For now, we play the role. Miss James needs to be seen, admired, and recognized as untouchable. What followed was 3 hours of performance art. Taeyang introduced her to politicians who smiled with empty eyes and businessmen whose handshakes felt like threat assessments. She smiled, spoke when appropriate, and radiated the kind of calm confidence that made people wonder about her origins and significance. Miss James, a rotund businessman, asked in English during one introduction, "How did you come to work with Mr. Park?" "Mutual benefit," Aaliyah replied smoothly. "I provide services he values, and he provides opportunities I need, like any successful business relationship." The man's eyes lit with speculation that Taeyang shut down with a single cold glance. They danced once, Taeyang moving with surprising grace, his hand at her waist, proprietary, but not presumptuous. "You're enjoying this," he observed as they turned across the floor. "I'm enjoying watching you pretend to enjoy this," Aaliyah corrected. "You hate these events, all this performance for people you'd rather eliminate than negotiate with. How your jaw clenches every time someone touches you or invades your personal space. Your smile never reaches your eyes. And you've positioned yourself so your back is never to the room, always maintaining visual access to exits and potential threats. You're not at a party. You're on a battlefield wearing a tuxedo." Taeyang's expression flickered with surprise. "You're disturbingly perceptive. I told you, Lagos taught me to read rooms faster than they could read me. Same principle, prettier setting." The music shifted to something slower, more intimate. Taeyang pulled her incrementally closer, not quite improper, but definitely noticed by the watching crowd. "What you did in the car," he said quietly, "making that call to the chase vehicle without consultation, that was either brilliant improvisation or reckless endangerment. It was survival. The bus created a bottleneck we couldn't navigate alone. I saw an opportunity to manipulate the tactical geometry and took it." "Tactical geometry," Taeyang repeated, something like amusement coloring his voice. Where did a Nigerian restaurant worker learn tactical geometry?" "From watching my mother work triage in overwhelmed emergency rooms, deciding which patients could be saved and which had to wait. It's the same principle. Assess resources, identify critical paths, act decisively within constraints." Aaliyah met his eyes. "And I wasn't just a restaurant worker. I had 2 years of pre-med before the economy collapsed and university became unaffordable. I understand systems, pressure points, and how to exploit both. You never mentioned medical training. You never asked. You researched my recent history, not my capabilities." She smiled without warmth. "Everyone underestimates me. It's one of my most useful assets." The song ended. They separated to polite applause, but Aaliyah caught the looks being exchanged around the room. Speculation, curiosity, and from certain corners, calculation. At 11 p.m., as the gala wound toward its conclusion, Junho's voice crackled through the nearly invisible earpiece Taeyang wore. "Hyungnim, we have a situation. Gwan Deoksu just left the hotel through the service entrance. He's meeting someone in the parking structure. Looks like Lee Tae-won." Aaliyah saw Taeyang's expression freeze. "Who's Lee Tae-won?" she asked quietly. "Cheongryong Alliance's third in command. If Deoksu is meeting him secretly, it confirms betrayal." His voice remained level, but something dangerous crystallized in his eyes. "Junho, can you get audio?" "Already on it. Patching through now." Taeyang touched his ear, listening to a conversation Aaliyah couldn't hear. His face revealed nothing, but his left hand curled into a fist. After 30 seconds, he spoke. "Record everything. I want timestamps and proof of conspiracy. Don't interfere. Let the meeting play out." "Confirmed," Junho replied. Taeyang guided Aaliyah toward a quieter corner of the ballroom, his movements casual to any observer, but purposeful. "Deoksu is selling me out," he said flatly. He's providing Cheongryong with our port schedules, security protocols, and information about our financial networks. In exchange, they're offering him control of Baeko operations once I'm eliminated. When? The hit is scheduled for next week during a shipment arrival. They're planning to stage it as a rival faction attack, and he's leaving Deoksu positioned to take emergency leadership and stabilize the organization by merging it with Cheongryong interests. Aaliyah processed this rapidly. But you knowing about it now changes everything. It does. I can move preemptively, eliminate Deoksu, and send a message to Cheongryong. But, he paused, conflict clear in his expression. That triggers immediate war. Every neutral faction will be forced to choose sides. Civilian casualties will be significant. Is eliminating one traitor worth hundreds of deaths? Only you can answer that, but I can tell you what I see. You're not just asking about tactical math. You're asking about the cost to your soul. How many deaths can you order before you become the thing you're fighting against? Taoyang looked at her sharply. You think I'm still fighting against anything? I run a criminal empire, Miss James. I lost moral high ground years ago. Did you? Because from where I'm standing, you've created something different from what came before. You don't traffic in people. You protect your territory's vulnerable populations from predatory lending and forced prostitution. You funnel money into schools and hospitals through charitable fronts. You're not just a gangster. You're trying to be a better kind of monster. Aaliyah held his gaze. But monsters who hesitate get eaten by hungrier monsters. So the question is, are you willing to get eaten to avoid crossing a line, or do you cross the line and live with the weight? Before Taiyang could respond, the building's fire alarm shrieked to life. Chaos erupted instantly. Guests surged toward exits. The orchestra abandoned their instruments. The hotel staff attempted crowd control with limited success. That's not a real fire, Aaliyah said, her tactical instincts screaming warnings. No, Taiyang agreed grimly. It's a distraction. Junho, report. False alarm triggered from outside the building. Definitely deliberate. I'm seeing multiple hostile signatures converging on your position. This is an extraction attempt using the evacuation as cover. Taiyang grabbed Aaliyah's hand. Stay close. Don't separate from me under any circumstances. They moved with the crowd toward the main exit, but Aaliyah noticed armed men in hotel security uniforms fanning out through the ballroom. Their positions too calculated, their focus too specific. Those aren't real security, she whispered. I know. Huang's people, probably coordinating with Deoksu's betrayal. They're going to try to take you in the confusion. Then we don't go where they expect. Aaliyah pulled Taiyang against the crowd flow, heading deeper into the hotel instead of toward exits. He followed without argument, trusting her instinct. They cut through the kitchen, stainless steel and shouting chefs scattering as they passed, and emerged into a service corridor. Aaliyah's pre-med training and countless hours of studying building schematics during slow work shifts gave her an intuitive sense of flow and structure. Service elevator to the parking garage, she said, pointing left. We can get to your backup vehicles without going through the main exits where they're waiting. How do you know? Hotels are just fancy hospitals with room service. Same basic architecture, public spaces up front. Service infrastructure hidden behind. Trust me. They reached the service elevator just as 3 men in hotel security uniforms rounded the corner behind them, weapons appearing from beneath their jackets. There, one shouted in Korean. Taiyang shoved Aaliyah into the elevator and punched the garage level button while simultaneously drawing his own weapon from a concealed holster. He fired twice. Clinical, precise shots that dropped the first 2 attackers before they could return fire. The third dove for cover, giving them critical seconds. The elevator doors closed. Aaliyah's heart hammered so hard she could feel it in her throat. You didn't hesitate, she observed. Hesitation gets you killed. Taoyang checked his weapon with practiced efficiency. Those men chose this life and accepted its risks. I don't feel guilty about surviving their attempt to kill me. The elevator descended. Aaliyah used the seconds to retrieve the Walther PPK from her clutch, checking the chamber like Wu Jin had taught her. When these doors open, Taoyang said, stay behind me until I've cleared the immediate area. If I go down, you run to level B3. There's an emergency exit marked in red that leads to street access. Code is 4782. Don't try to help me. Just survive. You really think I'd leave you? I think you're intelligent enough to recognize futile gestures. I'm trained for combat. You've had 3 days of shooting practice. If violence comes, your survival depends on letting me handle it while you escape. The elevator chimed. The doors opened onto the parking garage's harsh fluorescent lighting. Empty. Silent except for the hum of ventilation and distant traffic. Too quiet. It's an ambush, Aaliyah whispered. Definitely. Taoyang stepped out carefully, weapon raised, scanning angles. but they're waiting for us to commit fully. As long as we stay in the elevator threshold, they can't attack without exposing their positions. A voice echoed through the concrete space. Park Taiyang, Huang Taiman sends his regards. Aaliyah recognized the speaker, Guan Deoksu, his elderly features twisted with satisfaction. You betrayed your oath, Taiyang called back, his voice carrying cold authority. For what? Money? Power? Or just the chance to pretend you matter again? For survival. Deoksu emerged from behind a concrete pillar, flanked by 6 armed men. You're weak, Taiyang, protecting a foreign whore. You refusing to expand into profitable ventures because they offend your delicate morals. The old days are gone. Either adapt or die. The old days involved raping, trafficking, and destroying communities for short-term profit. I built something better. You built a fantasy, and Cheonggyeong is going to burn it down, with me rising from the ashes. Deoksu smiled. Give us the girl, and maybe we'll make your death quick. Aaliyah's grip tightened on her pistol. Mathematics played through her mind. 7 hostiles, 2 defenders, terrible firing angles, limited cover. The only advantage was that they wanted her alive, which constrained their tactics. Counterproposal, she said, stepping forward slightly so Deoksu could see her clearly. You and your Cheonggyeong masters walk away now, and we pretend this never happened. Because if you push this, you'll learn exactly why Park Taeyang is feared. Deoksu laughed. Bold words from a woman who's been in Seoul less than a year. You think you understand our world. You're just a tool, girl, leverage to be used and discarded. No, Aaliyah replied calmly. I'm a woman who watched her father die at 15, who put herself through university while working 3 jobs, who crossed an ocean to save her mother's life, and who has survived 11 months in your world by being smarter and more adaptable than people like you expect. You see a foreign woman and assume weakness. That assumption is going to cost you everything. Enough talk, Deoksu snapped. Take her, kill him. The 6 gunmen raised their weapons, and the parking garage exploded with violence. The Kang brothers emerged from behind vehicles like ghosts, their weapons already firing. 2 of Deoksu's men dropped instantly, the precise headshots leaving no doubt about the brothers' lethality. Simultaneously, the garage's lights died, plunging everything into near darkness except for emergency lighting and the strobe of muzzle flashes. Junho cut the lights, Taeyang said, pulling Aaliyah behind a concrete pillar as rounds sparked off the elevator frame where they had been standing. He's been monitoring remotely, must have called in backup the moment Deoksu appeared. More gunfire, shouting. The wet sound of bullets hitting flesh. Aaliyah's tactical training from Wu Jin kicked in. She identified angles, calculated positions, waited for opportunity. One of Deoksu's men broke cover, trying to flank Taeyang's position. Aaliyah didn't hesitate. She stepped out, raised the Walther PPK in a 2-handed grip, and fired 3 rounds center mass. The man went down hard. Jesus, Taeyang breathed. You actually can shoot. I told you, competent, not expert, but competent works at this range. The firefight ended in 90 seconds. When the emergency lights stabilized, 4 of Deoksu's men were dead or dying. 1 had fled, and Deoksu himself was on his knees, the Kang brothers' weapons pressed to his head from both sides. Hyung Nim, Wu Jin said. Orders? Taeyang approached slowly, his weapon still raised. His expression showed no emotion, just cold calculation. You betrayed everything, he said to Deoksu. 23 years of service, and you sold out for what? A promise from Cheonggyeong that they'd let you keep breathing? Deoksu spat blood. You're soft, weak. This organization will fall with you leading it. Perhaps, but I won't be around to see it, and neither will you. Taeyang raised his weapon. Aaliyah stepped forward, placing her hand on his arm. Wait. Everyone froze. Why? Taeyang asked quietly. Because killing him now makes him a martyr to anyone sympathetic to his position. But if you let him talk, record his confession about working with Cheonggyeong, and distribute it through back channels, he becomes a cautionary tale. Dead traitors are footnotes. Exposed traitors are lessons. Taeyang considered this, something shifting in his expression. Finally, he lowered his weapon fractionally. Junho, are you recording this? Every word in video. Junho's voice crackled through comms. Good. Deoksu, you're going to tell us everything. Every meeting with Cheonggyeong, every secret you sold, every detail of the planned hit. And then, we're going to release that confession to every faction in Seoul, showing them exactly what happens to traitors and exactly how weak Cheonggyeong's intelligence actually is. I'll die before I... Wu Jin pressed his gun harder against Deoksu's temple. That can be arranged right now, or you can live a few hours longer in a cell while you consider your options. Choose. 30 minutes later, Deoksu had confessed everything. The interrogation took place in a secure location 3 blocks from the hotel, a Beko safe house disguised as a closed auto repair shop. Aaliyah watched from the corner as Taeyang systematically extracted information, his questioning precise and unemotional. She learned that Deoksu had been planning betrayal for 18 months, slowly building connections with Cheongryong leadership who'd promised him control and profit shares. He'd arranged for Hwang Tae-min's vendetta against Aaliyah to be amplified, hoping to create chaos that would make Taeyang look weak and destabilized. The planned assassination next week involved a sniper positioned at the port, backup teams to handle bodyguards, and immediate Cheongryong forces to sweep in during the resulting confusion. By the time Deoksu finished talking, broken and exhausted, Taeyang had everything he needed. "Take him to the offshore holding facility," he told the Kong brothers. "Keep him alive and isolated until I decide his ultimate fate. No communication with anyone." As they dragged Deoksu away, Lee Hye-jin arrived, her elegant gown replaced by tactical clothing. "The hotel situation is contained," she reported. "We've leaked to media that the fire alarm was a technical malfunction, paid off witnesses who saw the firefight, and the hotel management is cooperating fully thanks to the bribes we've been paying them for years." Casualties? 4 of Hwang's men dead, identified by Seoul Metro Police as known criminals with outstanding warrants, convenient for everyone. 2 civilians treated for panic-related injuries, both compensated generously for their silence. Overall, minimal exposure. Taeyang nodded, but Aaliyah could see the weight settling on him, the cost of violence, even necessary violence. And Hwang himself? Gone to ground. Cheongryong is distancing themselves from the failed operation, and without their backing, Hwang is just a mid-level thug with dangerous enemies. He'll either flee Seoul or be killed by someone looking to curry favor with us. Hye-jin's expression turned speculative. "This ends the immediate threat to Miss James. The question is what happens next." Everyone looked at Aaliyah. She stood from the corner where she'd been observing, her black dress torn slightly from the violence, the black pearl necklace still gleaming at her throat. "I kept my end of the arrangement," she said. "I drew out the threats, helped expose Deoksu's betrayal, and survived the resulting chaos. My mother's treatment is secure, and according to our original agreement, I should be free to leave with enough money to start over elsewhere." "That was the agreement," Taeyang confirmed quietly. "But things have changed." Aaliyah looked around the room, at Hye-jin's calculating respect, at Jun-ho monitoring his screens with new appreciation, at the Kang brothers who'd fought beside her. "I'm not the same person who needed hiding 3 weeks ago. And you're not just a criminal protecting an asset. We've become something different to each other." Taeyang's expression remained carefully neutral. "What are you proposing? That we renegotiate? I don't want to be your housekeeper anymore. And you need someone in your inner circle who sees the world differently, who isn't corrupted by years in this life, who can read situations and people the way I do." Aaliyah stepped closer to him. "Make me part of your strategic operations officially. Give me real authority, real responsibility, and in exchange, well, I'll give you the one thing your current team can't: perspective from outside the system." Silence filled the safe house. Hye-jin spoke first. "She's proven herself capable and loyal. And she's right. We're too insular. We think like criminals because we are criminals. Someone with her background could see opportunities we miss." "She's smart," Jun-ho added, "and she actually listens to my analysis instead of just demanding bullet points." The Kang brothers nodded agreement. Taeyang studied Aaliyah with an intensity that felt like being dissected. "This life will consume you. Everything soft in you will harden. Every moral boundary you have will erode under pressure and necessity. Are you prepared for that corruption?" "I'm prepared to choose my corruption rather than have it chosen for me," Aaliyah replied. "In Lagos, I was powerless while everything around me collapsed. Here, I have the chance to build something, protect people, make decisions that matter. Yes, it comes with compromise and blood, but at least it comes with agency." "And your mother?" "Will continue receiving the best care possible, funded by work I choose to do rather than work I'm forced into. There's honor in that." Taeyang exhaled slowly, a decision settling across his features. "Then welcome to the Baeko faction, Miss James. Effective immediately, you're promoted to strategic operations consultant with full voting rights and tactical decisions. Your salary increases to 25 million won monthly, and you'll receive a proper apartment in the building rather than just quarters in my penthouse. I accept, on one condition, which is, stop calling me Miss James. If we're going to be partners, use my first name, Aaliyah." Something flickered in Taeyang's expression, surprise perhaps or relief. "Aaliyah then, and you can call me Taeyang when we're in private contexts." "Deal." They shook hands formally, sealing the new arrangement. But as Aaliyah felt his grip, firm, warm, surprisingly gentle despite the violence those hands had just committed, she understood that this was more than a business transaction. They'd become mirrors to each other. His isolation reflected in her displacement, her adaptability mirroring his strategic thinking, their shared understanding that survival required becoming something harder than they'd been born to be. But where that path led, neither could say. The weeks that followed transformed Aaliyah's role completely. She moved into a luxury apartment 3 floors below Tai Yang's penthouse. 2 bedrooms, floor-to-ceiling windows, and enough space that she could actually breathe without feeling watched. Her new position meant attending all strategic meetings as an equal voice, analyzing intelligence reports, and offering insights that often surprised the veteran criminals around the table. When Lee Hae-jin proposed expanding their money laundering operations into cryptocurrency markets, Aaliyah identified regulatory risks that would have cost them millions in frozen assets. When the Kang brothers suggested eliminating a rival gang's lieutenant, Aaliyah proposed instead recruiting him, correctly identifying that his loyalty was to money rather than ideology. When Junho's intelligence suggested a police crackdown on their port operations, Aaliyah recognized the leak pattern and traced it back to a low-level Baeko operative feeding information for drug money. She became indispensable quickly, her outside perspective catching angles that native Korean criminals missed. But the transformation wasn't just professional. Aaliyah began learning Korean intensively, hiring a private tutor and studying 4 hours daily. Her accent improved from halting to competent, allowing her to conduct meetings without translation. She learned the hierarchical etiquette that governed criminal interactions, who could speak first, how to show respect while maintaining authority, the subtle gestures that conveyed threat or submission. She learned to shoot with real proficiency, spending hours at Baeko's private range until she could put 10 rounds in a 2-inch grouping at 25 meters. And she learned to live with the weight of decisions that hurt people. The first time she voted to approve an assassination, a Cheongryong officer who'd been targeting their operations with increasing aggression, she didn't sleep for 2 nights, haunted by the abstract knowledge that her decision had ended a life. But the 3rd time, the 5th time, the 10th time, it became easier, not painless, but manageable. A cost of doing business in a business built on violence. Taeyang noticed the hardening. They'd fallen into a routine of late-night conversations, usually around midnight when the day's operations were concluded, and the city outside gleamed with oblivious beauty. "You're changing," he observed one night as they shared whiskey on his penthouse balcony. "Isn't that what you warned me about? That this life would corrupt everything soft? I warned you. I didn't say I wanted to be right." Taeyang stared at his glass, watching the amber liquid catch the light. "When Minseo was dying, she told me that the worst part wasn't the pain or the fear. It was watching me become someone she didn't recognize, someone hard and cold and capable of terrible things. Do you regret becoming that person? Every day. But regret doesn't change necessity. I built this empire because the alternative was being consumed by someone else's empire. I became hard because soft men don't survive in this world." He looked at Aaliyah directly. "But you had choices. You could have taken the money after Huang was dealt with and left, started over somewhere clean. Instead, you chose this deliberately." "I did. Because I finally understood something my mother used to say when I complained about corruption in Lagos. Power doesn't corrupt. Power reveals. It shows you who you always were beneath the restrictions of weakness." Aaliyah set down her glass. "This life isn't corrupting me. It's revealing that I was always someone willing to make hard choices if it meant protecting people I care about and building something that matters." "And what have you built here?" "Honestly, I don't know yet. But for the first time since leaving Nigeria, I feel like I'm building forward instead of just surviving day to day. That has to count for something." Taeyang reached out, his hand covering hers on the balcony railing. The gesture was simple, almost casual, but charged with layers of meaning they'd been circling around for weeks. "You matter here, Aaliyah. Not just as an asset or a strategic consultant. You've become..." He paused, clearly struggling with vulnerability. "You've become someone I trust completely. And I haven't trusted anyone completely since Minseo died." Aaliyah turned her hand, threading her fingers through his. "I trust you too," which is terrifying because trust in this world is usually a fatal mistake. "Then we'll both have to be careful not to betray each other. Deal." They stood in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching Seoul breathe beneath them. The moment felt suspended, fragile, like glass catching light before shattering. Then Taeyang's phone buzzed. An emergency alert. "What now?" Aaliyah asked as he checked the screen. His expression went cold. Wang Taimin just turned himself in to Seoul Metro Police. He's claiming he has evidence of police corruption involving the Baeko faction and is requesting protective custody in exchange for testimony. That's a coordinated move with Cheongryong's support. They know they can't kill me directly without starting a war, so they're using legal channels to dismantle the organization indirectly. Taiyang was already moving inside, making rapid calls. If Huang testifies, he can implicate enough politicians and police officers that our protective network collapses. Without that network, we're exposed to both legal prosecution and rival attacks. Aaliyah's mind raced. Can we eliminate him in custody? Possible, but incredibly risky. He'll be in a protected unit with cameras and guards who can't all be bribed. Any attempt that fails confirms everything he's claiming and makes us look desperate. Then we don't eliminate him. We eliminate his credibility. How? You said he's claiming to have evidence of corruption. Evidence can be fabricated, especially by someone with a history of violent crime and ongoing gang affiliations. What if we leak information showing that Huang is actually still working with Cheongryong, that his testimony is a coordinated false flag operation designed to eliminate rivals through legal warfare? Taiyang stopped mid-dial, considering. That could work, but we'd need proof. Actual communications between Huang and Cheongryong leadership, evidence of coordination, something that makes prosecutors question his motives. Junho can fabricate communications, Aaliyah pointed out. Fabricated evidence is too risky. Forensic analysis would expose it eventually. Taiyang's expression shifted. But Huang has been communicating with Cheongryong. Junho, can you hack Huang's phone records and email accounts? Junho's voice came through the speaker. Already working on it, Hyung-nim. Give me 3 hours. You have 2. The next 48 hours became a masterclass in information warfare. Junho breached Huang's digital life completely. Phones, emails, encrypted messaging apps, even deleted files recovered from cloud backups. What he found was damning. Months of communications with Cheongryong leadership, including specific instructions on how to fabricate evidence against Baeko operations, promises of protection and reward for testimony. They're in direct coordination with corrupt prosecutors who'd agreed to fast-track the case. This is perfect, Haijin said, reviewing the data. It shows a clear conspiracy to manipulate legal processes for criminal gain. If we leak this to the right journalists and honest prosecutors, yes, some still exist, Huang's credibility evaporates. But Aaliyah saw the larger pattern. It's not enough to destroy Huang. We need to destroy the perception that legal channels are a viable weapon against us. Otherwise, every rival will try the same tactic. What do you propose? Taiyang asked. We go public, all of it. Release the communications showing Cheongryong's corruption of legal processes, name the specific prosecutors and police officers involved, and frame this as a criminal conspiracy to pervert justice. Make it a scandal so large that the entire justice system has to respond by investigating Cheongryong and their allies rather than us. That's incredibly bold, Hyejin said. It could backfire spectacularly. Or it could work perfectly, Taiyang said slowly. The Korean public is already cynical about police and prosecutorial corruption. Concrete evidence of organized crime manipulating investigations would generate massive pressure for accountability. And if we position ourselves as the victims of a criminal conspiracy rather than criminals being investigated, we control the narrative. It'll require perfect execution, Aaliyah warned. The leak has to appear organic, multiple journalists receiving information simultaneously, building toward critical mass before authorities can suppress it. Junho smiled. I can make it look like the leak came from inside the prosecutor's office, a whistleblower horrified by the corruption they discovered, completely untraceable back to us. Do it, Taiyang ordered. The leak hit Korean media like a bomb. Within 6 hours, every major news outlet was covering the scandal. Organized crime corrupts prosecution, gang uses legal system as weapon, police officers implicated in criminal conspiracy. Huang's testimony collapsed immediately. The prosecutors who'd promised protection suddenly had their own careers under investigation. The police chief had to publicly announce an internal investigation into corruption. And Cheongryong, exposed as manipulators of legal processes, faced pressure from other criminal factions who relied on unofficial agreements that legal channels remained off-limits for gang warfare. Taiyang watched the news coverage from his penthouse, Aaliyah beside him, their strategic team assembled around the conference table. You've fundamentally changed the game, Lee Hee-jin said with genuine admiration. This isn't just defeating one attack. It's creating deterrence against an entire category of threats. Legal warfare is now toxic for any faction that attempts it. Credit goes to Aaliyah, Taiyang replied. She saw the strategic opportunity where I only saw a tactical problem. We saw it together, Aaliyah corrected. You understood the landscape, I identified the leverage point, partnership. Over the following weeks, the situation stabilized in Beko's favor. Huang Tai-min, abandoned by Cheong-ryong and facing multiple criminal charges, including false testimony and conspiracy, died in his protective custody cell, officially ruled a suicide, though everyone understood it was Cheong-ryong eliminating a liability. The corrupt prosecutors were transferred to administrative positions or resigned ahead of formal charges. Seoul Metro Police underwent a highly publicized anti-corruption initiative that actually removed several officers on Cheong-ryong's payroll. And Beko's reputation shifted from dangerous criminal organization to criminal organization that defends itself cleverly, a subtle but significant distinction that brought new allies seeking partnership with a group that won battles without excessive bloodshed. Through it all, Aaliyah and Tai-yang grew closer in ways neither fully acknowledged. Their late-night conversations became longer, more intimate. They shared histories neither had told anyone else, Aaliyah's guilt over leaving Nigeria while her friends struggled, Tai-yang's nightmares where Minseo accused him of abandoning her for power. They began finishing each other's tactical observations during meetings. Their decisions aligned so consistently that the inner circle joked they shared a brain, and they developed a physical awareness of each other that hummed beneath every interaction, the way Tai-yang's hand lingered when he handed her documents, how Aaliyah unconsciously leaned closer when they reviewed intelligence together, the charged silence when they were alone. But neither crossed the line into explicit acknowledgement. Tai-yang because he feared his world would corrupt anything pure, and loving Aaliyah felt like condemning her to his own isolation. Aaliyah because she understood that romantic entanglement with someone holding absolute power over her circumstances was dangerous, even if the feelings were genuine. So they circled each other, two people undeniably connected but maintaining careful distance, until the night everything changed. It was 3 months after Aaliyah's formal incorporation into the Baeko faction. She'd just returned from negotiating a territory agreement with a minor gang in Incheon, her first solo diplomatic mission. The negotiations had gone well. The rival gang's leader had underestimated her, expecting someone to patronize or seduce. Instead, she'd presented terms so precisely calculated that arguing seemed pointless, backed by implicit threats delivered with surgical calm. She'd returned to Seoul feeling powerful, competent, alive in ways she'd never experienced before. Tai-yang was waiting in her apartment when she arrived. Not unusual, they often debriefed after operations. But tonight, something was different. He stood by her windows, still in his business attire but with his jacket discarded and his shirt sleeves rolled up, an unusual casualness that suggested internal tension. The Incheon deal went well? He asked without turning. Perfectly. They agreed to our terms with minimal negotiation. I think my being a black woman actually helped. They were so busy being surprised that they forgot to be strategic. Aaliyah set down her briefcase. Why do you look like you've been pacing? Because I have been. Tai-yang finally turned to face her. I've been pacing for 2 hours. Been trying to decide whether to have this conversation or continue pretending the situation doesn't exist. Aaliyah's heart rate climbed. What situation? The fact that I'm falling in love with you, and it's the most terrifying thing I've felt in a decade. The words emerged raw, unfiltered. The silence that followed Tai-yang's confession filled Aaliyah's apartment like water rising, slowly, inevitably, until they were both drowning in it. Say something, he finally said, his voice rougher than she'd ever heard it. Tell me I'm insane, that this violates every professional boundary, that I'm confusing partnership with... You're not confusing anything. Aaliyah's words stopped him mid-sentence. I've been feeling it too, for weeks now. Maybe since that first night when you told me about Minseo, and I realized you were just as isolated as I was. Tai-yang's jaw tightened. Then you understand why we can't act on it, do I? Aaliyah. He moved closer, close enough that she could see the conflict warring in his dark eyes. I have power over your circumstances, your salary, your safety, your mother's medical care. Everything depends on my goodwill. Any relationship between us would be fundamentally imbalanced. You could never be certain your feelings weren't influenced by survival instinct, and I could never be certain you weren't simply protecting your position. That's remarkably presumptuous. Aaliyah's voice carried an edge. You're assuming I don't have agency, that I can't separate professional calculation from genuine emotion. I've spent my entire adult life navigating power imbalances, corrupt officials, exploitative employers, men who thought my need made me available. I know the difference between strategic compliance and authentic feeling. And what are you feeling now? The question hung between them, demanding honesty neither had fully offered before. Aaliyah took a breath, choosing her words with the same precision she used for tactical analysis. I'm feeling terrified because you're right. This is dangerous territory. I'm feeling frustrated because I've spent months building walls to keep this exact situation from happening. And I'm feeling, she paused, meeting his eyes directly. I'm feeling like for the first time since leaving Lagos, I've met someone who sees me completely. Not the role I'm playing, not the strategic value I provide, but the actual human underneath all the adaptation and survival. Taiyang's hand rose as if to touch her face, then stopped mid-movement. I do see you. That's the problem. I see how brilliant you are, how you've transformed yourself from refugee to power broker in 3 months. I see your strength and your vulnerability, your ruthlessness and your compassion. And I want, his voice cracked slightly, I want things I have no right to want. What things? To wake up next to someone who understands the weight I carry, to have conversations that don't require performance or calculation, to touch someone and have it mean something beyond transaction. His hand finally completed its journey, cupping her cheek with unexpected gentleness. I want to be human again, Aaliyah, and you make me feel like that's possible. Her breath caught. The vulnerability in his admission was so complete, so unguarded, that responding with anything less felt like betrayal. I left Nigeria, she said quietly, because staying meant watching my mother die while I was powerless to help. I came to Seoul and worked jobs where I was invisible, disposable, always one mistake from deportation or worse. The woman you see now, the one who negotiates with gangsters and votes on assassinations, she's not who I was a year ago, but she's exactly who I needed to become to survive. I know. No, you don't. Not completely. Aaliyah placed her hand over his, pressing it more firmly against her face. What I'm trying to say is that I've spent a year transforming myself through necessity. But with you, in these late-night conversations, it's in the moments when we're just two people instead of boss and subordinate, that's when I feel like I'm becoming who I actually want to be. Not just surviving, living. Taiyang's thumb traced her cheekbone, the touch so tender it made her chest ache. If we do this, if we cross this line, everything changes. The inner circle will question your authority, wondering if your voice in strategic meetings is genuine insight or pillow talk. Rivals will see you as leverage against me. And he leaned closer, his forehead almost touching hers. We risk destroying the one relationship that's felt real in years. I know the risks. I've been calculating them obsessively for weeks. Aaliyah's free hand came up to rest against his chest, feeling his heartbeat through the expensive fabric. But I'm tired of only making decisions based on risk mitigation. Sometimes the right choice is the dangerous one. You're certain? No. I'm terrified and reckless and probably making a mistake that will cost us both. She smiled without humor. But I'm certain that I want to make this particular mistake with you. Taiyang's control finally shattered. He kissed her with the desperation of someone who'd been holding back too long, his mouth claiming hers with intensity that bordered on violence, before softening into something achingly tender. Aaliyah responded with equal hunger, her fingers tangling in his hair, her body pressing against his with months of denied want, suddenly given permission. They broke apart, breathing hard, foreheads touching, both slightly shocked by the intensity. We should talk about boundaries, Taiyang said, even as his hands settled on her waist. Establish ground rules about professional separation, and, later, Aaliyah pulled him toward her bedroom. Right now, I need you to stop being the strategic crime lord and just be human with me. I don't know if I remember how. Then we'll figure it out together. What happened next wasn't the explosive passion of movies or romance novels. It was slower, more tentative. Two people learning each other's bodies and boundaries with the same careful attention they applied to tactical planning. Taiyang undressed her with reverent slowness, his hands tracing her curves like he was memorizing geography. When he reached the scar on her left shoulder, the one Huang's people had known about, he paused. How did this happen? Accident in my uncle's restaurant when I was 16. Oil burn from a deep fryer. Aaliyah's voice was steady despite her racing pulse. It hurt less than you'd think. I was so focused on not crying in front of customers that I barely felt it until later. You've been performing strength your whole life, haven't you? Yes, but I'm tired of it. Taiyang kissed the scar gently. Tonight, can we both stop performing? Yes. They made love with the awkwardness of first times and the intensity of long-denied need. Taiyang moved with surprising gentleness, constantly checking her responses, ensuring her pleasure matched his own. Aaliyah discovered that beneath his controlled exterior lived someone deeply attuned to subtle cues, the way her breath caught, where she was most sensitive, what touch made her gasp. Afterward, they lay tangled in sheets that cost more than Aaliyah's first month's salary in Seoul, both slightly stunned by what they'd just initiated. This complicates everything, Tai Yang said eventually, his fingers tracing abstract patterns on her bare shoulder. Yes, the inner circle will notice immediately. Probably. We'll need to establish protocols, professional boundaries during operations, clear separation between personal and strategic decisions. Tai Yang. Aaliyah turned to face him. Stop planning and just be here for a moment. He exhaled, tension releasing slightly. I'm not good at being here. Being present. I'm always 3 moves ahead, calculating outcomes, managing variables. I know, but just for tonight. Can you try? I can try. They lay in comfortable silence, the Seoul night glittering beyond the windows. Aaliyah felt the unfamiliar sensation of safety, not the strategic safety of calculated protection, but genuine emotional security with someone who saw her completely and hadn't run. My mother asked about you, she said quietly. In our last video call, she wanted to know about my employer, whether I was being treated well. What did you tell her? The truth, mostly. That you're demanding but fair. That you've given me opportunities I never expected. That you're... Aaliyah hesitated. That you're the first person in Seoul who's made me feel like I matter beyond my utility. Tai Yang's arm tightened around her. You matter far beyond utility. You've become... He stopped, searching for words. When Min Seo died, I thought I'd lost the last connection to anything human in my life. Everything since then has been strategy and survival. But you've reminded me that there's more to existence than just winning battles and accumulating power. What is there? I'm still figuring that out, but I think it involves this. Having someone to be vulnerable with, someone who knows the worst parts of you and doesn't flinch. Aaliyah shifted to look at him properly. I've seen you order executions, manipulate legal systems, and casually discuss violence like it's business logistics. I know exactly what you are, Tai Yang, and I'm still here. Because you've become the same thing. No, I've become someone who operates in your world, but I haven't lost the ability to distinguish between necessary violence and cruelty. Neither have you. That's why you funnel money to schools and hospitals, why you protect vulnerable populations, why you hesitated before killing Deok-soo. She traced his jawline with one finger. You're not a good man, but you're not the worst man either. You're complicated, self-aware, and trying to build something better than what came before. I can work with that. Can you love it? The question emerged so quietly she almost missed it. I don't know yet, Aaliyah answered honestly. I know I care about you more than is strategically wise. I know I trust you with things I've never trusted anyone with. And I know that when you look at me the way you're looking at me right now, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Whether that's love or just intense connection born from shared trauma and danger, time will tell. Tai Yang smiled, a real smile that transformed his usually cold features into something almost boyish. That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. Your standards are concerningly low, or you're just exceptionally honest. He pulled her closer, his lips finding hers in a kiss that was slower, deeper, a promise of continued exploration. Stay with me tonight. Not because of strategy or safety, but because you want to. I want to. They fell asleep tangled together, 2 people who'd learned to survive alone discovering tentative comfort in proximity. Morning arrived with Seoul's typical industrial sunrise, gray light filtering through pollution and glass towers, the city waking with its usual controlled chaos. Aaliyah woke first, disoriented by the unfamiliar weight of another person in her bed. Tai Yang slept with surprising stillness, his usually tense features relaxed, looking younger than his 34 years. She studied him in the dawn light, cataloging details. The small scar above his left eyebrow, the way his hair fell across his forehead without product to hold it back, the subtle vulnerability of sleep that he'd never show while conscious. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message from her mother. Saw the doctor yesterday. He says the new medication is working better than expected. I might actually dance at your wedding someday. Love you, my strong girl. Aaliyah's chest tightened. Her mother had no idea what work funded those medications, what choices her daughter had made to secure that care. The cognitive dissonance between her mother's innocent hopes and Aaliyah's actual life felt like a knife. Your expression suggests bad news. Tai Yang's voice was rough with sleep. No, good news actually. My mother's responding well to treatment. Aaliyah set down the phone. She made a joke about me getting married someday. It's the first time she's sounded hopeful about the future in months. You feel guilty. Constantly. She thinks I'm working as a business consultant for a legitimate company. If she knew the truth, she'd be horrified, Tai Yang finished, but she'd also be alive. You made choices that prioritized her survival over your moral comfort. That's not something to be ashamed of, isn't it? I've become someone who votes on whether people live or die. I carry a weapon. I've killed someone. Aaliyah's voice dropped. Last month, when we approved that hit on the Cheongryong lieutenant, I didn't lose sleep over it. That should terrify me, but it doesn't. I've adapted so thoroughly that murder is just another business decision. Taiyang sat up, the sheets pooling around his waist. You want to know the difference between you and actual monsters? What? Monsters don't question themselves. They don't feel guilt or examine their choices for moral weight. You do. That internal dialogue, that constant evaluation of cost versus necessity, that's what keeps you human. He touched her face gently. The day you stop feeling conflicted about violence is the day you should worry. Until then, you're just someone making impossible choices in impossible situations. Is that what you tell yourself? Every day. Sometimes I even believe it. They shared a moment of dark humor, two people bonding over shared moral corruption. Aaliyah's phone buzzed again. This time, in a message from Junho in the Inner Circle group chat. Emergency meeting. 9 a.m. Cheongryong just made a move. The domestic spell shattered instantly. Taiyang was already moving, gathering his clothes with efficient speed. What kind of move? Aaliyah asked, pulling on her own clothes. That's what we're about to find out. Taiyang's transformation from vulnerable lover to cold strategist happened in seconds, walls rising, emotional shields deploying. We need to maintain professional boundaries at this meeting. No indication that our relationship has changed. Agreed, but Taiyang, yes? Last night wasn't a mistake. Whatever happens today, I want you to know that. His expression softened fractionally. Neither do I, but we protect this by keeping it separate from operations. Can you do that? I've been performing roles my entire life. I can perform one more. The emergency meeting convened in Taiyang's penthouse conference room at exactly 9 a.m. The inner circle assembled with unusual tension. Even Li Hye-jin, normally composed, showed signs of stress in the way her fingers tapped against her tablet. Junho had the main screen displaying a news article from an hour ago. Cheongryong Alliance announces merger with International Syndicate. The article detailed how Seoul's second-largest criminal organization had just formalized a partnership with the Yamaguchi Gumi, one of Japan's most powerful Yakuza families. This changes everything, Hye-jin said without preamble. Cheongryong just multiplied their resources, territorial reach, and political connections by a factor of 10. They're positioning for total domination of Seoul's underworld. When did this partnership form? Taiyang's voice was ice. We're not sure, Junho admitted, looking frustrated. I've been monitoring their communications for months and missed this completely. Either they use channels I don't have access to, or this was planned at levels above digital communication, face-to-face meetings in secure locations. Or you have a leak, Aaliyah said quietly. Everyone turned to stare at her. Explain, Taiyang ordered. Deoksu's betrayal 3 months ago exposed us. Cheongryong learned our operational patterns, communication methods, and intelligence-gathering techniques. They've had time to adapt, to route important communications through channels they know Junho can't monitor. Aaliyah pulled up her own tablet, was displaying analysis she'd been working on. I've been tracking anomalies in our information flow. Small things, meetings that seem to leak before they happen, operations that encounter unexpected resistance, rivals who know our movements too precisely. You think we still have a mole, Wu Jin said. I think Deoksu wasn't working alone. He was old school, comfortable with traditional methods. But some of the intelligence Cheongryong has shown recently requires digital sophistication he didn't possess. Aaliyah highlighted several incidents on her timeline. Someone younger, more tech-savvy has been feeding them information, and they've been smart enough to limit what they share, making the leak harder to detect. Junho's face went pale. You're suggesting someone on my team. I'm suggesting we audit everyone with access to sensitive systems, including your team, yes, but also administrative staff, security personnel, anyone who's joined the organization since Deoksu's capture. That's hundreds of people, Hye-jin protested. Then we start with the highest access levels and work down. Aaliyah met Taiyang's eyes across the table. This merger with Yamaguchi Gumi didn't happen in a vacuum. Cheongryong needed to demonstrate value. Operational intelligence about their primary rival would be incredibly attractive to Japanese partners. We've been compromised, and we need to find the breach before it kills us. Taiyang absorbed this, his strategic mind clearly racing through implications. Junho, implement a compartmentalized communication system immediately. No one except people in this room gets access to full operational intelligence. Everyone else receives only what they need for their specific tasks. That'll slow down our operations, Minho warned. Better slow than dead. Taeyang's voice carried absolute authority. Aaliyah, you're leading the internal audit. You have full access to personnel files, financial records, and surveillance footage. Find the leak. What about the Yamaguchi-Gumi situation? Wu Jin asked. That's a longer-term problem. The merger is announced but not fully operational yet. They're still integrating command structures and territorial agreements. We have maybe 3 months before Cheongryong can leverage their new alliance effectively. Taeyang stood, signaling the meeting's conclusion. Use that time to fortify our position. To shore up alliances with neutral factions, diversify our revenue streams so we're not dependent on vulnerable territories, and prepare for the possibility of open war. The inner circle dispersed with grim purpose, leaving Aaliyah and Taeyang alone in the conference room. You see patterns I miss, he said quietly. How long have you suspected a leak? 6 weeks, but I needed more data before saying anything. Aaliyah closed her tablet. I'm sorry I didn't bring it up sooner. Don't apologize for being thorough. If you'd brought suspicions without evidence, it would have just created paranoia. Taeyang moved to the windows, his usual thinking position. This merger is going to force difficult decisions. Yamaguchi-Gumi doesn't play by Korean underworld rules. They're more violent, more expansionist, less concerned with civilian casualties. You're worried you'll have to become something worse to compete. I'm worried I'll have to burn down the slightly better empire I've built and replace it with something uglier just to survive. He turned to face her. The irony isn't lost on me. I spent years trying to reform criminal operations into something less monstrous, and now I might have to reverse all that progress. Aaliyah joined him at the window. Or you find a third option. You're not limited to either capitulation or escalation. There are always other moves. Such as? I don't know yet, but give me time to think, and I'll find an angle. She smiled slightly. That's what you pay me for, remember? I pay you for a lot more than that now. The moment felt charged. The previous night's intimacy bleeding into their professional interaction, despite efforts to compartmentalize. We should maintain distance, Aaliyah said, even as she didn't move away. Like you said, the inner circle will notice. They already suspect. Hyejin's been watching us like we're a case study in poor judgment. Taeyang's hand found hers. But you're right. We need boundaries. Tonight, though, Aaliyah squeezed his fingers, after operations, can we just be human again for a few hours? Yes, your place or mine. Yours. My apartment feels too small after last night. They separated with visible effort, Aaliyah heading to begin her audit, while Taeyang returned to managing the immediate crisis. The internal audit consumed the next 3 weeks. Aaliyah worked with methodical precision, cross-referencing personnel records against operational timelines, looking for patterns of information leakage. She interviewed staff members with Junho's assistance, studied financial transactions for anomalies, and slowly built a profile of the likely mole. Whoever it was had joined Baeko operations approximately 5 months ago, right after Deoksu's betrayal but before his capture. They had access to mid-level operational intelligence, but not inner circle decisions. They were careful, limiting their leaks to information that wouldn't immediately compromise major operations, but would give Cheongryong strategic advantage over time, and they were someone everyone trusted enough to have been missed during standard security reviews. 3 candidates emerged from Aaliyah's analysis. Kim Min-ji, 27-year-old financial analyst who'd been hired to help Hyejin manage increasingly complex money laundering operations. Brilliant with numbers, quiet personality, no obvious red flags. But her brother had gambling debts with a Cheongryong-connected loan shark. Park Sung-ho, 31-year-old security coordinator who managed logistics for protection details. Former military. Excellent record, recommended by a lieutenant who'd since retired. But his bank account showed deposits that didn't match his salary. Small amounts easily overlooked, totaling about 15 million, won over 4 months. Yoon Jin-woo, 24-year-old tech specialist working under Junho, coding prodigy, hired for his ability to maintain the organization's encrypted communication systems. Socially awkward, lived alone, seemed to have no life outside work. But his internet history showed visits to dark web forums where intelligence was traded. Aaliyah presented her findings to Taeyang in his penthouse late one evening. All 3 have means, opportunity, and potential motives, she explained, laying out dossiers. But only one has the technical capability to evade Junho's monitoring, Yoon Jin-woo. He's brilliant enough to know what signals to suppress, how to communicate through channels Junho wouldn't think to watch. But, Taeyang prompted, hearing the hesitation in her voice. But he also seems the most obvious suspect. Young tech genius with questionable social connections. It's almost too perfect. Could be a decoy. Someone Cheongryong wants us to focus on while the real leak continues operating. So how do we determine which one? Aaliyah smiled darkly. We feed each of them different false information and see which version reaches Cheongryong. Classic counterintelligence technique. Over the next week, they implemented a carefully controlled information operation. They told Kim Min-ji that Baeko was planning to expand into cryptocurrency markets through a partnership with a Taiwanese group, completely fabricated, but plausible enough to be valuable intelligence. They told Park Sung-ho that a major shipment would arrive at Busan port on a specific date, requiring enhanced security. Also false, but tactically interesting to rivals. They told Yoon Jin-woo that Junho had developed a new encryption protocol that would be implemented next month, technical information that seemed important. Then, they waited. 48 hours later, Junho detected Cheongryong Communications discussing plans to interfere with the Taiwanese cryptocurrency partnership. Kim Min-ji, Aaliyah said, feeling no satisfaction at being right. She sold us out to protect her brother. The inner circle convened to determine Min-ji's fate. Standard protocol is execution, Woo Jin said flatly. She betrayed the organization. There's no ambiguity here. Execution sends a message, Hyejin agreed. It reinforces that betrayal carries absolute consequences. But Aaliyah saw Taeyang's hesitation, the same conflict she'd noticed before. The struggle between necessary ruthlessness and the humanity he tried to preserve. May I suggest an alternative? She asked. Go ahead, Taeyang said. We use her. She doesn't know we've identified her as the leak. We continue feeding her information, controlled leaks that benefit our strategic position. Cheongryong thinks they have reliable intelligence, but everything they're receiving is manipulated to serve our goals. That's risky, Junho said. If they suspect she's compromised, they'll test her information in ways that could expose our deception. Every option is risky, Aaliyah countered. But a controlled double agent is more valuable than a corpse. We can use her to feed Cheongryong false confidence, manipulate their decision-making, and potentially even identify their command structure through backtrace of her communications. The inner circle debated for an hour. Finally, Taeyang made his decision. We use her as a double agent, but with extreme caution. Junho monitors every communication. Aaliyah designs the false intelligence we feed through her, and the moment we suspect Cheongryong has discovered the deception, we eliminate her. Agreed? Everyone nodded. There's one more thing, Aaliyah added quietly. Her brother's gambling debts. The leverage Cheongryong is using against her family. If we eliminate that leverage, she might become genuinely loyal rather than just a managed asset. You want to pay off her brother's debts? Hyejin sounded incredulous. I want to remove Cheongryong's control mechanism. Yes, it costs us money up front, but it potentially converts a forced mole into a loyal operative who's grateful rather than resentful. Aaliyah met Taeyang's eyes. Sometimes the most strategic move is the merciful one. Taeyang considered this, clearly recognizing the philosophy underlying her suggestion, that building loyalty through compassion was more sustainable than ruling through fear alone. Do it, he ordered. Pay the brothers' debts quietly. Make it seem like a windfall rather than our intervention. Then, we'll see if Minji's loyalty shifts. The Yamaguchi-Gumi merger proceeded despite their countermeasures. Over the following months, Cheongryong and their Japanese allies began consolidating power. Several neutral factions were absorbed through intimidation or negotiation. The territorial boundaries shifted as the alliance expanded into districts previously considered neutral ground. Baeko found itself increasingly isolated, still powerful, still profitable, but surrounded by a coalition that outnumbered and outresourced them significantly. The pressure created internal stress. Some of Baeko's lower-level operators began defecting to Cheongryong, attracted by promises of greater protection and opportunity. Revenue streams came under attack as the alliance squeezed their operations systematically. Taeyang handled the crisis with cold competence, but Aaliyah watched him fray at the edges, sleeping less, eating irregularly, the weight of impossible decisions accumulating like physical mass. Their private relationship became the only space where he could be vulnerable. Late nights in his penthouse, after strategy sessions and damage control, they would collapse together, sometimes making love with desperate intensity, sometimes just holding each other while the city breathed beyond the windows. I'm losing, Taeyang admitted one night, his voice raw with exhaustion. Not quickly, but inevitably. The mathematics are against us. Cheongryong has more resources, more territory, and the backing of an organization that's been operating successfully for over 100 years. I can't compete with that. Then don't compete on their terms. Aaliyah traced patterns on his bare chest. You've been trying to match their conventional power, territory for territory, violence for violence. But what if you changed the game entirely? How? I'm still working it out. But I keep thinking about something my uncle used to say about market competition in Lagos. When you can't win by being bigger, win by being different. She propped herself up on one elbow. Cheongryong and Yamaguchi-gumi are traditional criminal organizations, hierarchical, territorial, operating through intimidation and violence. What if Baeko became something else, something they're not equipped to counter? You're being deliberately cryptic, because the idea isn't fully formed yet. Aaliyah kissed him softly. But give me time. I'll find the angle. How much time do we have? Realistically, 3 months, maybe 4, before Cheongryong feels confident enough to move directly against us. They're still consolidating the merger, integrating Yamaguchi-gumi operations into Korean territory. That integration creates vulnerabilities, cultural differences, communication gaps, competing priorities between Korean and Japanese leadership. Tae-yang's strategic mind engaged despite his exhaustion. You think we should target the merger itself, try to fracture the alliance? Maybe. Or maybe we use the fractures that already exist to create space for something new. Aaliyah settled against him. I need to research more, study how similar situations have played out historically. There are patterns in organizational conflict, principles that transcend cultural specifics. You're reading academic papers on criminal strategy now? I'm reading everything I can find about asymmetric warfare, organizational psychology, and power dynamics. Knowledge is leverage, and we need every bit of leverage we can find. They fell asleep planning. 2 people using strategy to hold back despair. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Aaliyah had been meeting with Kim Minji periodically, ostensibly to review financial reports, but actually to assess whether paying off her brother's debts had shifted her loyalties. During one of these meetings, Minji mentioned something that sparked recognition. I was reviewing the revenue data from Cheongryong's operations that we've been tracking. Their port operations have increased significantly since the Yamaguchi-gumi merger, but their profit margins have actually decreased. They're moving more product, but making less money per unit. Why? Aaliyah asked, paying closer attention. Best guess? The Japanese are demanding larger cuts than Cheongryong's previous partners. Plus, witty. They're importing their own operational methods, more layers of bureaucracy, more people getting paid at each level. It's inefficient compared to how Cheongryong used to operate independently. Aaliyah felt pieces clicking into place. She spent the next 3 days analyzing every scrap of intelligence they had about the Cheongryong-Yamaguchi-gumi alliance. Financial flows, communication patterns, operational directives, personnel movements. A picture emerged. The merger wasn't as smooth as it appeared. Korean and Japanese criminal cultures operated on fundamentally different principles. Cheongryong valued flexibility and quick decision-making, while Yamaguchi-gumi preferred rigid hierarchy and traditional protocols. The integration was creating friction at multiple levels. She presented her findings to Tae-yang in a formal briefing that included the entire inner circle. The alliance is strong militarily, she began, but operationally fragile. There are 3 critical fault lines. First, financial resentment. Cheongryong's mid-level operators are making less money despite working harder because Yamaguchi-gumi demands larger tribute. That creates frustration that's being suppressed but not resolved. Second, cultural conflict. Japanese Yakuza culture emphasizes rigid hierarchy and formal rituals. Korean gang culture is more pragmatic and flexible. The clash creates operational inefficiencies and interpersonal friction. Third, territorial ambiguity. The merger agreement didn't clearly define which organization controls which territories in contested areas. Both sides are making moves that the other sees as encroachment, creating internal competition that undermines unity. So they're vulnerable, Woo Jin said. How do we exploit it? We don't attack them directly. We amplify the existing fractures. Aaliyah displayed her strategic proposal on the main screen. We make Cheongryong's operators even more resentful by targeting the specific operations that generate revenue for Yamaguchi-gumi. We exacerbate cultural conflicts by leaking information about disrespectful behavior from Japanese leadership toward Korean subordinates. And we create territorial incidents that force both sides to choose between unity and their own interests. That's elaborate psychological warfare, Hyejin observed. Can we execute it without exposing our involvement? With Junho's technical capabilities and the double-agent intelligence through Minji, yes. We make everything look like either organic internal conflict or external pressure from unrelated third parties. Tae-young studied the proposal with visible calculation. This is a long-term strategy. It won't produce immediate results. No, but it's sustainable. We can't match their conventional power, but we can systematically undermine their cohesion until the alliance collapses from internal contradictions. And if it doesn't collapse, then we've at least degraded their operational effectiveness enough to survive until other opportunities emerge. This isn't about winning quickly. It's about not losing while we search for a winning position. The inner circle debated the proposal from multiple angles, identifying risks and potential complications, but ultimately, they recognized what Aaliyah had, that conventional resistance was suicide, but asymmetric psychological warfare gave them a chance. We implement this, Taiyang decided. The transformation of Baeko's operational model didn't happen overnight, but when it did, it was revolutionary. 8 months after Operation Fracture's implementation, Aaliyah stood in a conference room that looked nothing like a criminal enterprise headquarters. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Seoul's financial district. The furniture was minimalist Scandinavian design. The staff wore business casual rather than intimidating black suits. This was Baeko Solutions, a legitimate consulting firm specializing in international trade logistics with subsidiary operations in digital security, financial services, and urban development. On paper, it was completely legal. In practice, it was the most sophisticated criminal organization Seoul had ever seen. We've completed the acquisition of the Incheon Shipping Company, Lee Hee-jin reported during the morning strategic session. She'd adapted to the new model seamlessly, her financial genius finding fuller expression in complex corporate structures than simple money laundering. That gives us controlling interest in 40% of container traffic through Incheon Port, all completely legitimate business operations that happen to provide perfect cover for selective cargo management. Revenue projections? Taiyang asked. He'd traded his all-black wardrobe for tailored business suits in navy and charcoal, looking every inch the successful CEO rather than crime boss. Legal operations are generating 2.3 billion won monthly and growing. Our traditional underground operations have decreased to about 800 million won, but with significantly reduced risk exposure. Hee-jin smiled with genuine satisfaction. We're making more money with better legal protection while actually providing legitimate services to the market. Aaliyah watched the transformation with mixed feelings. They were succeeding beyond anyone's expectations. Baeko had essentially gone legitimate without losing its criminal capabilities. But something felt hollow about the victory. What about the Cheongryong situation? She asked. Junho pulled up surveillance data. The alliance with Yamaguchi Gumi is holding, barely, but they're hemorrhaging mid-level operators to either us or independent operations. Our psychological warfare degraded their cohesion enough that many of their best people are looking for alternatives. And we're recruiting them into legitimate positions, Wu Jin added. He'd taken to the new model surprisingly well, managing what they called competitive security consulting. Bodyguard services, threat assessment, corporate protection. Former Cheongryong enforcers make excellent security personnel when you pay them properly and don't treat them as disposable. The meeting continued for another hour, covering everything from cryptocurrency investment strategies to political lobbying efforts. Baeko was becoming exactly what Taiyang had envisioned years ago, a criminal organization that had evolved beyond criminality into something genuinely hybrid. As the inner circle dispersed, Taiyang caught Aaliyah's arm. You've been quiet. Problems with the strategic direction? No, the strategy is brilliant. We're winning by transforming the battlefield. Aaliyah followed him into his private office, an executive suite that rivaled any legitimate corporation's CEO quarters. I'm just trying to figure out what we are now. Are we still criminals playing at legitimacy? Or have we actually become something different? Taiyang settled behind his desk, the morning light catching the Seoul skyline behind him. Does it matter? It matters to me. I left Lagos to save my mother, got pulled into your world out of necessity, and helped build this new model because it was better than the alternative. But I'm realizing I don't know what I'm building toward anymore. What's the end game, Taiyang? Do we just keep expanding until we're a legitimate conglomerate with a criminal past? Do we use our influence to gradually reform the entire underworld? Or are we just painting over rot and calling it renovation? Those are fair questions. I wish I had clear answers. Try anyway. Taiyang was quiet for a long moment, his fingers steepled beneath his chin, the gesture he made when wrestling with complicated thoughts. When I took over Baeko 8 years ago, he finally said, I told myself I was building something better than what came before. Less exploitation, less casual violence, more strategic operation. But I was still fundamentally running a criminal empire. I just made it slightly less monstrous. And now? Now I think we've stumbled into something genuinely different. Not because we're morally superior, but because we found a model that's more profitable and sustainable. We're not pretending to be legitimate. We are legitimate, with criminal capabilities held in reserve for situations that require them. He met her eyes directly. The question isn't whether we're still criminals. It's whether that matters if the net result is less violence, better economic opportunity, and more stability than the purely criminal model provides. Aaliyah absorbed this, recognizing the philosophical complexity beneath the pragmatism. You're saying the ends justify the means. I'm saying the means have fundamentally changed, which transforms the ends. We're not stealing and killing to accumulate power anymore. We're building actual businesses, creating real jobs, providing genuine services, and yes, maintaining criminal capabilities for protection and strategic advantage. But the balance has shifted. Until we need to use those criminal capabilities. Then what? Do we tell ourselves it's justified because most of what we do is legitimate? Yes, because that's objectively true. Taiyang's voice carried complete certainty. The old Baiko killed an average of 30 people per year. Rivals, traitors, witnesses, collateral damage. This year we've killed 2 people, both of whom were actively trying to murder our personnel. Our drug operations have shifted from distribution to harm reduction consulting with pharmaceutical companies. Our prostitution networks have transformed into employment agencies for entertainment industry workers with actual labor protections. He stood, moving to the windows. Are we saints? No. Do we still break laws and hurt people when necessary? Yes. But we're causing objectively less harm while creating more value than any purely criminal organization could. That has to count for something. Aaliyah joined him at the window, watching Seoul's endless motion. Millions of people pursuing their lives, unaware of the shadow structures that shaped their city. It counts for something, she agreed quietly, but it doesn't absolve us of the harm we do cause. We're just more efficient monsters now. Perhaps. But I'd rather be an efficient monster that builds schools and hospitals than an inefficient one that just destroys. Taiyang's hand found hers. You're the one who taught me that. That power reveals who you've always been. I was always someone who wanted to build rather than just dominate. This model finally lets me do that. And what does it reveal about me? That you're someone who sees systems clearly and wants to optimize them for better outcomes, even if the optimization requires moral compromise. His fingers tightened around hers. You're not comfortable with what we've become, but you recognize it's better than the alternatives. That tension between pragmatic acceptance and moral discomfort, that's what keeps you human. Before Aaliyah could respond, her phone buzzed with an urgent alert from Jun-ho. Turn on the news. Now. They grabbed the remote, switching to the main business channel. The headline made Aaliyah's blood run cold. Seoul prosecutors announce investigation into Baeko Solutions founder Park Tae-yang. Allegations of criminal money laundering through legitimate business fronts. The news anchor's voice filled the office. Prosecutors claim to have evidence that Baeko Solutions, the rapidly growing logistics and consulting firm, is actually a front for organized criminal activity. The investigation focuses on founder and CEO Park Tae-yang, age 35, who allegedly has connections to Seoul's underworld dating back over a decade. This is Cheongryong, Tae-yang said immediately, his voice deadly calm despite the catastrophic news. They couldn't beat us in direct competition. So they're using legal warfare. It worked for us against Huang, Aaliyah pointed out. Why wouldn't they try the same tactic? Because we have actual legitimate operations now. They can investigate all they want. Our books are clean, our businesses are real, and any criminal connections are buried under layers of corporate structure. Unless they have a witness. The thought hung between them with terrible weight. Tae-yang's phone rang. Lee Hyejin's voice was sharp with stress. We have a problem. Kim Minji disappeared 3 hours ago. Her apartment's been cleared out, and she left behind a resignation letter that mentions cooperating with authorities to correct past mistakes. Fuck. Tae-yang's composure cracked. She's the witness. Cheongryong must have approached her, offered protection and immunity in exchange for testimony about our criminal operations. She knows everything, Aaliyah said, her tactical mind racing through implications. Our money laundering structures, personnel with criminal histories, operations that straddle legal and illegal lines. If she testifies comprehensively, she can connect enough dots to bring down the entire legitimate facade. Can we eliminate her before she testifies? Wu Jin's voice came through the speaker. Not without confirming every accusation they're making, Tae-yang replied. Killing a witness under protective custody is exactly the kind of obvious criminal behavior that would destroy us. We need a different approach. Aaliyah's mind worked frantically, searching for angles, leverage points, anything that could shift the tactical geometry in their favor. What if we don't fight the investigation? She said suddenly. Everyone on the conference call went silent. Explain, Taeyang ordered. They're expecting us to resist, use lawyers to delay, intimidate witnesses, destroy evidence. Standard criminal response that confirms guilt even if it prevents conviction. But what if we do the opposite? Cooperate fully, open our books, invite auditors, demonstrate that Baeko Solutions is exactly what we claim, a legitimate business built by someone with an admittedly questionable past who's trying to go straight. That's insane, Hee-jin protested. Full cooperation means exposing everything. No, it means exposing everything they can prove. Yes, Taeyang has criminal history. Yes, some of our employees came from underworld backgrounds. But all of that can be framed as reformation rather than continuation. Former criminals building legitimate careers, exactly the kind of redemption story the public loves. And Minji's testimony, Junho asked, becomes the word of a disgruntled employee with her own criminal involvement, trying to destroy the company rather than face accountability for her actions. We don't deny she worked for us or that she has knowledge of questionable activities. We frame her as an infiltrator who's now working with our competitors to destroy what we've built. Taeyang absorbed this strategy, his expression shifting from defensive panic to calculated consideration. That's an enormous risk. If they find anything concrete, they won't because we've been meticulous about separating legitimate operations from criminal ones. The only direct evidence of ongoing criminal activity exists in systems Junho controls and can purge before any audit reaches them. Aaliyah moved to the whiteboard, sketching out the strategy visually. We don't fight the investigation. We embrace it, control the narrative, and come out looking like exactly what we claim to be. Reformed criminals building something better. The inner circle will have to distance themselves, Hee-jin said slowly, clearly working through the implications. Anyone with outstanding warrants or obvious criminal history becomes a liability. Then we temporarily transfer them to positions that don't show up on corporate records. Consulting roles, independent contractors, offshore operations. Aaliyah was building the plan in real time, each piece clicking into place. We make Baeko Solutions so clean and legitimate that Minji's testimony sounds like conspiracy theory rather than fact. And our actual criminal operations? Woo-jin asked. Go completely dark for 6 months. No drugs, no enforcement, no questionable financial transactions. We survive on legitimate revenue alone while the investigation proceeds. It'll hurt profits, but it ensures survival. The conference call erupted in debate. Arguments about risk tolerance, questions about implementation, concerns about trusting a strategy so counterintuitive to criminal instinct. But Taeyang cut through the noise with quiet authority. Aaliyah's strategy is sound. We implement it immediately. Junho, begin systematic purge of compromising digital evidence. Hye-jin, prepare our financial records for full audit, make them pristine. Kong Brothers. Transition to private security consulting with zero criminal involvement. Everyone with outstanding legal issues goes on leave with full pay until this resolves. Hyung-nim, Minho protested. This feels like surrender. This is the opposite of surrender. We're choosing the battlefield, controlling the engagement, and turning their attack into an opportunity to legitimize ourselves completely. Taeyang's voice carried absolute certainty. Trust the strategy. The inner circle accepted his decision with varying degrees of comfort, but they accepted it. As the conference call ended and the office emptied, leaving only Taeyang and Aaliyah, the weight of what they'd just committed to settled heavily. This could destroy everything we've built, Taeyang said quietly. Or it could complete the transformation we started. Turn us from criminals pretending to be legitimate into actually legitimate operators who used to be criminals. Aaliyah moved behind him, her hands settling on his shoulders. You wanted to build something better than what came before. This is how we get there. By burning away everything that was left of the old Baeko and emerging as something genuinely new. You make it sound noble. It's just survival. Most noble things are just survival dressed in better rhetoric. Taeyang turned to face her, pulling her into his arms with desperate intensity. If this fails, if we lose everything, then we rebuild somewhere else. But we won't lose. I've calculated every angle, and this approach gives us the best chance of not just surviving, but actually winning. They stood together in the executive office. Two people who'd built an empire on the ruins of their former lives, now gambling everything on a strategy that required becoming the very thing they'd been pretending to be. Outside, Seoul gleamed with oblivious beauty. the city that had witnessed their transformation from refugee and criminal to something neither could have predicted. The investigation began with brutal intensity. Sole prosecutors, emboldened by political pressure and media attention, descended on Beko Solutions with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for high-profile corruption cases. They audited financial records going back 5 years. They interviewed current and former employees. They brought in forensic accountants to trace money flows through complex corporate structures. And Beko cooperated with everything. Nick Taiyang gave interviews where he openly acknowledged his criminal past while emphasizing his reform. "I'm not proud of who I was," he told a primetime news program, his controlled demeanor projecting sincere regret. "I came from a world where violence and exploitation were normal. But I recognize that path led nowhere sustainable. Beko Solutions represents my attempt to build something legitimate, to create economic opportunity for people like me who want to leave criminal life behind." The interviewer pressed, "But prosecutors claim you're still involved in organized crime, just using corporate structures to hide it. Prosecutors are investigating allegations from a former employee who was caught embezzling and is now trying to destroy our company out of revenge. We've opened our books completely. If they find evidence of ongoing criminal activity, I'll face the consequences. But they won't, because it doesn't exist." The performance was masterful, just enough acknowledgement of past wrongdoing to seem honest, combined with confident denial of current criminality. Meanwhile, Aaliyah orchestrated a parallel campaign. She arranged for business journalists to write profiles of Beko Solutions employees, former gang members now working legitimate jobs, single mothers who'd found employment in their logistics operations, university graduates getting their first career opportunities. She coordinated with social media influencers to highlight Beko's corporate charity work, the scholarships they funded, the community centers they'd renovated, the small businesses they'd helped through microloan programs. She even arranged for testimonials from politicians who'd benefited from Beko's civic engagement, carefully worded endorsements that emphasized the company's positive community impact without explicitly defending against criminal accusations. Oh no. The narrative shifted gradually but unmistakably. What had started as criminal organization uses business as cover evolved into reformed gang leader builds legitimate empire despite past, and finally, redemption story or criminal deception, the complicated truth of Beko Solutions. The ambiguity was perfect. Even if prosecutors couldn't prove current criminality, they also couldn't definitively disprove it. But in the court of public opinion, the doubt worked in Beko's favor. People wanted to believe in redemption stories. 3 months into the investigation, Kim Minji finally testified. Aaliyah watched the proceedings from the gallery, her expression neutral while her heart hammered. Everything they'd built could collapse in the next few hours if Minji's testimony was compelling enough. Minji looked small on the witness stand, nervous but determined. The prosecutor led her through her employment history, establishing her credentials and access to sensitive information. "Ms. Kim, can you describe the true nature of Beko Solutions?" Minji took a breath. "It's a front organization for criminal activity. The legitimate business operations exist, but they're designed to launder money from drug trafficking, illegal gambling, and other underground operations that Mr. Park still controls. Can you provide specific examples?" "I managed financial transfers that were coded as consulting fees, but were actually payments for illegal activities. I processed invoices for services that never existed, creating false revenue to justify income from criminal sources. I witnessed meetings where Mr. Park and his associates discussed enforcement operations, territorial agreements, and other gang-related business disguised as corporate strategy." The testimony was damaging, but not devastating. Minji provided general descriptions but few concrete details, suggesting she was either being careful not to implicate herself too deeply or genuinely didn't have access to the most sensitive information. When the defense attorney cross-examined, the strategy became clear. "Ms. Kim, you were fired from Beko Solutions for embezzlement, correct?" I resigned. "But there was an investigation into financial irregularities involving your accounts, wasn't there?" "There were questions, yes. Questions about 15 million won that disappeared from company accounts you managed?" Minji's face flushed. "That money was compensation for dangerous work I was forced to do." "So you admit you took money without authorization?" "I was protecting my brother. They threatened him with—" "Who threatened him? Please be specific." "The organization, Cheongryong. They—" Minji stopped, realizing her mistake. "So you were being extorted by Cheongryong Alliance, a rival criminal organization, not by Beko Solutions?" "It's complicated. The threats came because of my employment with Baeko. But Baeko didn't threaten your brother. A rival organization did. And when did you first make contact with prosecutors about testifying? About 4 months ago. Shortly after Cheongryong approached you, offering protection in exchange for testimony against Baeko? I wanted to do the right thing. The right thing, or the profitable thing. How much immunity from prosecution for your own embezzlement were you offered in exchange for this testimony? The cross-examination continued brutally, systematically undermining Minji's credibility. By the time she left the stand, she looked less like a courageous whistleblower and more like a compromised witness with personal motivations for lying. But the prosecution still had evidence, documents, financial records, testimony from other witnesses who'd corroborated parts of Minji's account. The trial stretched across 6 weeks of technical testimony, expert witnesses debating the legitimacy of financial transactions, and character witnesses speaking to Taeyang's transformation. Aaliyah attended every session, taking notes, analyzing jury reactions, passing observations to their legal team. She watched Taeyang maintain perfect composure under relentless questioning, never defensive, always confident that the evidence would exonerate him. And slowly, agonizingly, it began to. Forensic accountants couldn't find definitive proof of money laundering. The transactions Minji had flagged were complex but technically legal, involving real services provided to real clients. Witnesses who claimed to have seen criminal activity had credibility problems, previous convictions, connections to rival organizations, financial incentives to testify. The prosecution's case was circumstantial at best, suggesting strong suspicion, but lacking the concrete evidence needed for conviction. On the trial's final day, Taeyang took the stand for his own defense. The lead prosecutor went straight for the kill. Mr. Park, you admit you were involved in organized crime for over a decade. You admit you ordered violent acts, managed illegal operations, and built wealth through criminal enterprise. Why should this court believe you've changed? Taeyang's response was quiet, but powerful. Because change isn't about belief, it's about evidence. Look at what Baeko Solutions has built in 3 years. We employ over 300 people in legitimate operations. We've invested 50 billion won in community development. We've created economic opportunity in districts where criminal organizations used to only extract wealth. That doesn't answer whether you're still involved in criminal activity. Then let me be explicit. I am not currently involved in any illegal operations. Every business Baeko Solutions operates is legal, licensed, and audited. Yes, I hire people with criminal pasts because I understand that past doesn't define future. Yes, I maintain connections with people who operate in gray areas because completely cutting ties with my former world would be both impossible and counterproductive. But the core question is whether I'm running a criminal enterprise disguised as legitimate business. The answer is no. How can we trust the word of someone with your history? You can't, but you can trust evidence. You've had full access to our records, our employees, our operations. If this were still a criminal organization, you would have found proof. The fact that you haven't, despite 3 months of intensive investigation, suggests the proof doesn't exist because the crime doesn't exist. The closing argument stretched across 2 days. The prosecution emphasized Taeyang's undeniable criminal history and the suspicious patterns in Baeko's operations. The defense emphasized the lack of concrete evidence and the legitimate transformation of a former criminal into a productive business leader. When the jury retired to deliberate, Aaliyah and Taeyang waited in a private room with their legal team. What are our chances? Taeyang asked the lead attorney. Honestly, 60-40 in our favor. The prosecution couldn't prove ongoing criminality, but juries don't like admitting that former gang leaders can genuinely reform. It depends on whether they value evidence over intuition. Hours passed with excruciating slowness. Aaliyah held Taeyang's hand beneath the conference table, their fingers intertwined with desperate intensity. If this goes wrong, she whispered, we run. I've already prepared contingencies, false identities, offshore accounts, extraction routes. I'm not running. If the verdict is guilty, I face it. That's noble and stupid. It's the only way to protect what we've built. If I run, it confirms guilt and destroys Baeko Solutions. If I stay and face consequences, the business survives under your leadership. I don't want to lead it without you. You might have to. The bailiff entered. The jury has reached a verdict. They returned to the courtroom, every eye and soul seemingly watching through cameras and reporters. The jury foreman stood holding the verdict paper with trembling hands. On the charge of money laundering through criminal enterprise, not guilty. On the charge of racketeering, not guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit organized crime, not guilty. Aaliyah felt Tae-young's grip tighten convulsively. Around them, their legal team exhaled in relief, but the judge wasn't finished. Mr. Park, you are acquitted of all charges. However, I want to be clear that this verdict reflects insufficient evidence rather than proven innocence. The court recognizes your efforts toward legitimate business operations and encourages their continuation, but you remain under scrutiny. Any future allegations will be investigated with extreme prejudice. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor. Then you're free to go. The courtroom erupted in controlled chaos, reporters shouting questions, cameras flashing, supporters and detractors equally vocal in their reactions. Tae-young and Aaliyah exited through a side entrance surrounded by security, moving toward waiting vehicles with practiced efficiency. Only when they were safely in the car, driving toward Beko Solutions headquarters, did Aaliyah finally speak. We won. We survived, Tae-young corrected. Winning would have been avoiding the trial entirely. Don't minimize this. We faced a coordinated attack designed to destroy everything we'd built, and we not only survived but emerged with our legitimacy arguably strengthened. The verdict sends a message. Beko Solutions is real, our transformation is genuine, and legal warfare won't work against us. Tae-young pulled her close, his composure finally cracking. I was terrified, not of prison, but of losing this, losing you, losing the future we're building, losing the chance to be something better than what I was. You are something better. We both are. Aaliyah kissed him softly. And we just proved it to everyone watching. The acquittal's aftermath reshaped Seoul's underworld landscape. Cheongryong's attempt to destroy Beko through legal means had failed spectacularly, damaging their own credibility in the process. And other criminal organizations took note. Beko had discovered a model that provided both profitability and legal protection. Over the following months, 3 mid-sized gangs approached Tae-young requesting assistance, transitioning to legitimate operations. They'd seen what Beko had built and wanted to replicate it, moving from purely criminal enterprise to hybrid models that generated sustainable revenue with dramatically reduced risk. Tae-young agreed to help, establishing what he called the Reformation Collective, a network of former criminal organizations transforming themselves into legitimate businesses while maintaining mutual protection agreements. It was unprecedented in Korean underworld history. You're essentially creating a criminal rehabilitation program disguised as business consulting, Aaliyah observed during one strategic session. Is that a problem? No, it's brilliant. You're not just saving Beko, you're changing the entire game. In 5 years, Seoul's underworld might be dominated by legitimate businesses with criminal origins rather than criminal organizations pretending at legitimacy. And the net result is less violence, more economic opportunity, and better outcomes for communities that used to be purely victimized by gangs. Tae-young smiled. Your influence, I think. This was your strategic framework. Don't fight the system, transform it from within. I just provided analysis. You made the decision to actually implement it despite the risks. They'd fallen into easy partnership. Their relationship, both professional and personal, seamlessly integrated. The inner circle had adjusted to seeing them as a unit, Aaliyah's strategic insight complementing Tae-young's operational authority, creating leadership that was stronger than either could provide alone. But success created its own complications. 6 months after the acquittal, Aaliyah received a video call from her mother in Lagos. Kioma James looked healthier than she had in years. The medication was working, her color had returned, and she'd even gained weight, but her expression carried concern. My daughter, she said in Yoruba, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Aaliyah's stomach clenched. What is it, Mama? The money you send, it's too much. The treatments are expensive, yes, but not so expensive that a business consultant working in Korea could afford this level of care plus supporting yourself. I'm grateful, but I'm not foolish. Chioma's eyes held the same penetrating intelligence that Aaliyah had inherited. What kind of work are you really doing? The lie would have been easy. Aaliyah could have invented a story about bonuses, investment success, generous employer compensation, but she'd spent a year becoming someone who made hard choices and faced their consequences. Lying to her mother now felt like betraying everything she'd fought to preserve. I work for someone powerful, she said carefully. Someone who operates in complicated spaces, legal and sometimes not legal. My role is strategic consulting. I help him make better decisions, find solutions that minimize harm, I'd transform his organization into something more legitimate. Chioma was quiet for a long moment. Is this man your employer or something more? Both. And do you love him? The question caught Aaliyah completely off guard. She and Taiyang had never explicitly discussed love. Their relationship existed in demonstrated actions rather than declared feelings. I don't know. Maybe. It's complicated. Love usually is. Kioma's expression softened. Aaliyah, I raised you to be strong, intelligent, and adaptable. You've clearly become all those things, but I also raised you to know the difference between survival and living. Are you surviving or are you living? I don't know anymore. Both, maybe. I'm doing work that matters, building something meaningful, using my capabilities fully. But I'm also operating in a world where violence is always close, where every decision has moral weight, where I'm constantly calculating risk versus reward. Aaliyah felt tears threatening. I left Lagos to save you, Mama, but I think I might have lost myself in the process. Then find yourself again. You're young, brilliant, and apparently powerful in ways I don't fully understand. Use that power to build a life worth living, not just worth surviving. Kioma leaned closer to the camera. And bring this man to meet me. If he's important to you, I should know him. If he's using you, I'll tell you directly. Despite everything, Aaliyah laughed. He's terrified of you already. Good. Fear means respect. Kioma smiled warmly. I love you, my daughter. Whatever choices you've made, whatever world you're operating in, you're still my Aaliyah. Don't forget that. The call ended, leaving Aaliyah emotionally raw in ways she hadn't experienced since leaving Nigeria. Taiyang found her on his penthouse balcony an hour later, staring at Seoul's night sprawl with distant eyes. Your mother's call didn't go well? He asked, joining her at the railing. It went too well. She asked the right questions, and I gave honest answers. Aaliyah turned to face him. She wants to meet you. Says if you're important to me, she should know you. Terrifying prospect. That's what I told her. Aaliyah smiled slightly. But she's right. We've been operating in this strange liminal space where we're partners in everything, but we've never actually defined what we are to each other. What do you want us to be? I don't know. I know I care about you more than strategic sense recommends. I know I trust you with parts of myself I've never shown anyone else. I know that when I imagine the future, you're in it. She paused. But I also know we built this relationship in crisis, constant danger, strategic pressure, survival imperatives. I don't know if it survives in normal circumstances, or if normal circumstances even exist for people like us. Taiyang pulled her close, his arms encircling her with familiar security. I love you. The words hung in the night air, simple and devastating in their honesty. That's the first time you've said it, Aaliyah breathed. I know. I was afraid saying it would make you a target, or compromise your decision-making, or... He stopped. No, that's rationalization. I was afraid you'd reject me. And I was afraid this... us was just survival strategy rather than genuine feeling. I was afraid of being vulnerable in ways I haven't allowed myself since Mincio died. And now I don't care about fear. You asked me 8 months ago what I was thinking when you walked into my office that first night, when my hand shook and I spilled whiskey. I was thinking about how isolated I'd become, how the empire I'd built was just an elaborate cage, and then you appeared, strong, intelligent, uncowed by my reputation. And I thought maybe there was still a chance for something real. Aaliyah felt tears sliding down her face, the emotional walls she'd maintained for so long finally crumbling. I love you too. I fought it for months, told myself it was just proximity and shared danger and strategic alliance. But it's not. It's you. The way you carry impossible weight without complaining. The way you try to build something better despite understanding how difficult that is. The way you see me completely and don't flinch. They kissed with the desperate intensity of people who'd finally admitted what they'd been feeling for almost a year, the Seoul night surrounding them with indifferent beauty. When they finally separated, both breathing hard, Taiyang said, I'll meet your mother. Whenever you want to arrange it, I should probably be terrified, but mostly I'm honored that you think I'm worthy of the introduction. She'll interrogate you mercilessly. Good. I'd be disappointed if she didn't, he smiled. But first, we should probably figure out where we go from here. By Echo Solutions is stabilizing, the Reformation Collective is expanding, and we're both genuinely surprised to have survived this long. What's our actual endgame? Aaliyah considered the question seriously. In Lagos, my endgame was just survival. Get through university, find work, help my family. Then, it became more specific. Get to Korea, earn enough for mother's treatment, stay alive. I've been operating on short-term objectives for so long that I forgot to imagine a longer future. Imagine it now. I want I want to build something that outlasts us, not just a business or an empire, but actual institutional change. You've started transforming Seoul's underworld. I want to complete that transformation. Make it genuinely possible for people to leave criminal life and build legitimate futures. Create economic structures that provide alternatives to exploitation. Use the power we've accumulated to actually improve the systems we operate within. That's ambitious. It's also achievable, given our resources and influence. Aaliyah's strategic mind engaged fully. We don't have to just survive anymore. We can actually build towards something meaningful. And us personally, beyond the strategic objectives, I want normal things, a home that feels like home rather than just secure accommodation, time to actually live rather than just operate. Maybe eventually, she hesitated, maybe eventually the chance to build something that isn't about power or survival. A family, if that's even possible for people like us. Taeyang's expression shifted through surprise to something softer. I'd like that, all of it, though I suspect normal might be permanently out of reach for us. Then we'll build our own version of normal, one that acknowledges what we are while leaving room for who we want to become. They stood together on the balcony, two people who'd met in desperation and built something neither had expected. A partnership that was strategic and emotional, professional and intimate, ruthless and tender in equal measure. The future stretched ahead uncertain, but no longer entirely dark. For the first time since leaving Lagos, Aaliyah felt something she'd almost forgotten: hope to be continued.